Get it.
I don't like Figments.
Chris,
So now
hey,
it's sad.
you left it
I can get
to
something
the
else.
two of
No,
us.
I
Come on.
trying to read it, but
zooming
was so.
Time to do it. So I don't have my.
Extra copies for you.
Just need something.
But if you want to look at it, that's
Thank you. Good morning. 11:35 on February 5th here at the Parkhurst School. Welcome to a school committee meeting of Winchester School Committee. A quick rundown on the agenda. We have public comment, if any. Probably won't be a student report today since they're in school. Under reports and discussions, a long list update on district goals from the superintendent, update from Dr. Evans's goals for the school year. We have a report from our capital planning representative, Mr. Vinalia, a kind of high-level update from Zena and Michelle on what's going on with the policy subcommittee. We have some continued discussion around statements of interest for the Morocco and Lynch schools to the Massachusetts State School Building Association. And then we have some more discussion on the FY20 budget, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss and share what took place at the Finance Committee meeting last night and then subsequently the Select Board meeting. Under action items, we have a couple of minutes to review and approve. Chair report, superintendent report, and a review of future agenda items. We do have need for an executive session this morning to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for units B, C, and D, since discussion in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on bargaining or litigating position of this committee. And then we'll confirm our next meeting dates and then an adjournment. So with that, anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, let's move on to number 4, reports and discussion items. Judy?
Each year, in my tenure here as superintendent, we have set pretty clear and measurable district goals in the fall as the culmination of a process that begins with the leadership team in the summer, discussion in a joint meeting between the leadership team and the school committee, and hard work to try to set some achievable yet rigorous goals for the following school year. I'll provide a brief update. I think many of the things that I'm going to say you have already heard because we've been providing information throughout the fall, and be happy to answer any questions that you might have. A lot of the goals have to do with ongoing efforts managed by other members of the leadership team, primarily Janelle and Emma, around curriculum, instruction, and assessment, and also Jason Levine, our new Director of Counseling, Health, and Wellness. So he did prepare an update on the wellness plan, the district wellness action plan, and so we've provided some additional information on activities since then. The state-required screening, intervention, referral to treatment process has been completed, and also we are moving forward with the youth risk behavior survey work for both middle and high school students, funded by Leahy Health again this year. All of the Middlesex schools are participating and will get an analysis as we did last time. So that's all good news. In terms of professional development, I'll leave Jen to answer any questions. She actually has provided in this report an overview of all of the professional development this year that I thought was pretty comprehensive, and she'd be happy to answer any questions about that. So that's goal 1. Goal 2 has to do with meeting the needs of individual learners. And the greatest accomplishment in this area has been our work through the development and use of performance-based assessments. And I'll ask Jen to speak briefly at the end around what's planned for the summer with performance-based assessments. But the expansion has been gratifying and I think is yielding both better instruction and better assessment of student learning and very engaged learning. The goals related to analyzing and adjusting homework and grading practices have been slower for us to address. We really started with the assumption that you begin with the end in mind, and if the goal is to reduce homework and stress, it's easier to say let's adjust our homework practices. But when we started to dig deeper into what teachers were using homework for and what their beliefs were about homework, we found that there are some deep-rooted core beliefs about homework and grading that are going to take longer for us to address. So before we engage in a sort of a community discussion about that, we really have been spending more time at the ground roots level with teachers It's going to take longer, but I think in the end, rather than just imposing an hour limit on homework or types of homework, getting people to really change their practices is what is most important. The teacher resource team is really something that is a Tier 2 intervention. It's very helpful for us to have an additional staff member to help lead that, and Fran Wolf to work with district administrators and principals. It is a evolving model, and again, Jen is working hard with that group, and she and Lori both could speak to that if you have questions. Why don't I pause here and take questions on the first 2 or 3 district goals, and Jen, you can jump in if I've forgotten anything important.
I did have a question about the shifting from TRTs over to more of a student support team.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of how many students, and is this all grade levels, and what is it about? What's the goal of it?
Right. So just very generally speaking, what used to be a teacher resource team is very teacher focused to support teachers in their practice, as opposed to a student support team that's more focused on individual student needs. But Lori and Jen, actually, I walked in on a meeting they were having, and they've got a great practice to help the district transition to a better model. So you want to jump in and
Sure.
speak to that?
So we're starting with the elementary, and there's 5 of us that sit on the core team. So it's Jason, Lori, Pam, Fran, and myself. And so we see every what's called an SST that comes in, which is a student referral. The process really, it happens in every district, and it's legally part of what you need to do as part of the special ed process. So students shouldn't be referred for special education until we've tried to do some interventions that would support students and the teacher with whatever struggles manifesting in the classroom. So we look at that. We do a couple of things. One, we do immediate supports for that teacher and that student. So it often means one of us going in and helping and coaching with the process, or if it's an EL student, we'll send like Laura Shanahan in. If it's a literacy issue, Katie Malone. We have some teachers starting to work with teachers as well. And then we also look at that data and trends and patterns and what we're seeing become professional development and interventions in the building, and also data for us on what we're seeing more practices around or more questions coming up for us to focus in on. So we just started that this fall, so that started in October. We are hoping to do a gradual release with this. As much as we love to see the data and be involved, it really shouldn't sit with us for long. This is just part of the pilot as we're transitioning. So it's been very helpful to see that data, and it's nice for us to get into classrooms and then we help them do some mini lessons too, and do some modeling, and embrace the things we're trying to say as a district, that we all risk take, that we're all trying things, that we're all, if one thing doesn't work, you don't just keep doing what you've always done. Try some new things. How do we help that individual student and the rest of the class? So
No, I think that's great, and I think what this pilot model, when it's just opened the conversation up. So before it was at schools, individual teams, and so you had 6 or 7 people here. You've got leaders talking, and then getting into the classroom. So it really gives us a very different perspective, which helps us in so many ways that Jen is. So it's pretty exciting.
What I like about this transition to a student support team model is that students who get referred to student support team, or what used to be teacher resource team, are students who are struggling in some way, behaviorally, socially, emotionally, academically. And teachers refer when they've exhausted what they think they can do to support that student. And it used to be that these all happened at the school level. A team would meet and say, well, do you think it's this? Do you think it's this? Do you think it's this? And then the teacher would have the responsibility to go back and implement whatever interventions were recommended. Whereas in this approach, a team of people don't just say to the teacher, have you tried this? Have you tried this? You go back, you're on your own. Figure it out and come back in 6 weeks. It is actually people going in and coaching and working with the teacher or doing an observation of the child. And that helps to really get at the root of what are the options that we can use to support students in a better way. If we had building-based instructional coaches, those would be the first people we could send. If we had building-based adjustment counselors, those would be the people we'd send. We're just stretched so thin in terms of, particularly at the elementary level, additional people other than the principal and the assistant principal to help with an intervention, that we really see that more students get to special education referrals and then get diagnosed with a disability, particularly a social emotional disability, anxiety, depression. And if we were able to help the teachers address it earlier, then I think it could help not only the students be more successful, but save us resources. So when people say to me, why do we need instructional coaches? It's because our students have a wider range of learning needs, and sometimes you need someone to go in and work directly with the teacher to try a variety of strategies, because not every strategy is going to work for every child. If the teachers knew what to do, they wouldn't have to ask for help or make a referral, because they've already tried everything they know what to do. And so I'm really heartened by this. At the middle school and the high school, they have their own student support teams that do still need to transition in this way as well. But they are working fairly traditionally still, Jen, would you say?
Yes, but they are their student support teams, so that wasn't from us, that was from them. So it is, but yes, we have not met with them yet to talk about these pieces and the idea of really that coaching and going in, because like Judy said, under the old model, the teacher would come and report, and then teachers would just brainstorm with them for 20 minutes, and then their segment would be over. Like, we all go in and observe. Like, I'm working with a teacher and a cherub, and I went in to observe 2 times, and then we meet, and then I'll do a mini lesson, and then teachers can't do that because they're teaching in their own classroom during the day. So that's why we need coaches or the pieces that can help with that, because you need to see it with that objective lens. We always say, for all of us, when you're in the act of teaching, you're not able to detach and observe and see what's happening. So they don't notice the antecedents that might be revving the student up. They're not aware of what those are because they're busy teaching. So.
Any other questions for Judy on the first part?
I have a
Brian?
question. I apologize I didn't reach out to you before. We've
No
been thinking
problem.
about budgets. I'd say the number one thing that families are reaching out and asking is, when are we going to start looking at homework? And so you answered it quite eloquently here, I think, but I think the larger community is still wanting to know this, wanting to know, when are we going to have reach out groups, focus groups, when are we going to start looking at this and addressing this? Because it was sort of it was originally going to follow after the school start time. So it's not really a question so much as just make sure that communication of what's taking place with this and timelines, I think, should be key.
Sure. No, I think that's an excellent suggestion. The middle school and the high school are kind of tackling it from different angles. We're also tackling it from the perspective of what's the purpose of a mid-year and final exam at the middle school, for example, really trying to decide whether we in fact need final exams at the middle school, which are a great source of stress for students and families. So, and at the high school, Dennis Mahoney and leadership at the high school are tackling it around homework-free weekends, or expanding the time available to take exams, and taking a look at what do we do when students have several exams on the same day? Do we need a policy or a practice at the high school that says students are encouraged to say to their teachers, I already have 2 exams on Thursday, is it possible I can take it another day, or can we move it a day or 2? So those discussions are starting to happen. A parent approached me and said, you're the superintendent, can't you just say cut homework in half? And the top-down method doesn't generally trickle down very well, because what is the purpose of homework? What are teachers using it for? What homework do we find helpful? So we really are trying to get at changing internal practices, which takes longer. So I need to communicate with parents about this, but in the meantime, I think it's really important for parents and students to communicate with teachers and say, my child is staying up till midnight every night. This amount of homework is excessive. Is there any that can be optional? Is there some other way we can learn this material? And advocate for their own children. Parents need to advocate for their own children.
Students need to learn to advocate for themselves as
And then
well.
when the students get older, to advocate for themselves. I spoke with the head of the union about this at our monthly meeting and talked about how we can change practice. And she said, she's a math teacher at the high school, and she said, I often have students come to me and say, I'm overwhelmed, I couldn't get this finished, or I have too many exams tomorrow. And she said she would regularly say, her response would only be, so how can I help you with this? Would you like to take it next week when you're ready? Or, I know you've been sick for 2 weeks. There's no rush to finish this assessment. And so that's the mindset that we need to have. Sometimes we equate smart with being fast and finishing things at the same time as everyone else, and that isn't necessarily the best way to measure what students have learned. And I can tell you as a parent, my children had a rigorous program of studies. They weren't always as successful as they would have liked to have been with it when they were in high school. And there were some days where they just had to stay home because they had so much homework the night before they didn't sleep at all, or I'm pulling the cards out of their hands at 2 a.m. when they're still studying. It was not a healthy situation, and until you're a parent of high school students who are really pushing themselves very hard, I think you don't have a clear sense for the toll that extracts on them and how little true learning is really happening. So we want to have a rigorous program of studies. We want to provide great opportunities for our students. We don't want to hold anybody back, but we also don't want to push people over the edge. So that's the balance that's taking us a long time to kind of find.
What you just said is fantastic. I just wanted to make sure
Yes.
the
parents hear
parents
that.
Right.
the people
Yeah.
who are
Write it
listening.
down.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll put it on a meme.
Can I
Yeah.
just follow up to that? I would like to know how we can support you, and the budget talks are a great venue for it, but how we can support you in innovative types of learning so that kids are able to demonstrate their learning through performance assessments, through projects, rather than the normal nightly homework, nightly studying for tests. Like, there's so much opportunity, it sounds like, with a lot of the PD you guys have
Right.
put out, that there's innovation out there that I would love to see in our classrooms.
So the funding for professional development will be key. Jen has, what do you have, 40 people signed up to do performance-based assessments, something like that?
We have 80-something people now in the district. There's 40 that are new.
So, ready to work this summer,
Yeah.
and we don't have enough money in the budget to pay them. And so, without an override, a lot of that's not going to happen. Jen's working with people to rewrite curriculum units. Again, pretty costly. We've sent a whole slew of teachers out to learn different ways to teach reading and writing. We had to reach out for grant funding for that. And so having enough, having sufficient resources in professional development is going to be key. Our budget is very limited in that regard, and without WIFI and ENCA and, kind of begging other people to pay for it outside, we wouldn't be able to make it happen. I think the instructional coaches are key, the job-embedded professional development, helping teachers, giving them feedback while they're teaching, and encouraging them to try things and getting feedback on it from someone who's watching is important. Our principals and assistant principals are really busy and they do a lot of evaluation, but they can't be instructional leaders the way we would like them to, given how few of them there are and how many teachers we have. And so how we can support it through the budget is funding for professional development, funding for curriculum renewal and revision, and instructional coaches, I think, are the key. Jen, is there anything else that I've forgotten?
No, I think that's the piece tied to the budget because, I think, to your point about principals, we have to remember at the elementary schools, it's one half-time assistant principal except for at Lynch. So it's not
Right.
2 people at each building, it's 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What was the third thing? I'm sorry. I have instructional coaches, PD, and
Money for curriculum revision, which is a form of professional development, but
Right.
to have a dedicated amount for that would be important. I have a very small amount kind of phased in over 3 or 4 years in the budget ask.
And just a plug,
Mm-hmm.
the Twitter feeds from McCall and the high school and Jen
Mm-hmm.
about professional development and what's going on in classrooms are fabulous communication tools if people are interested in sort of getting a look into what is already happening along those lines in the classrooms. And if there were ways to get more of that information out to people and those pictures of what people are actually doing, I think pictures sometimes worth 1,000 words. to
This is
people,
a
too.
good point. I'm really always energized when I see what the teachers are sharing via Twitter in terms of what their students are doing. And the professional development day yesterday, the half day, we saw a lot of engaged teacher learning and not a lot of teachers sitting at a desk taking notes. And so the model for professional development has changed. How many sessions did you have yesterday, Jen?
33, I think, yesterday.
33 different offerings. And how many did you pay outside people to do?
I think just one.
So the beauty of the way we've encouraged teachers and expected administrators to offer professional development saves us a lot of money. The typical presenter coming from the outside is at least a couple of $1,000s per half day. And so we don't pay people to do this if they're in-house because it's already on their work time. And they generously spend lots of time behind the scenes preparing and facilitating professional
And the
development.
quality is equivalent to
Well,
a
Jen makes sure that there's a plan.
Yeah, I mean, teachers are doing a great job with it. I think, sometimes, again, people are trying new things. So, we had a group yesterday that said, oh, like we finished early. And it's like, okay, like like we're trying new things, like that happens. But every person, what they're taking is something that's their expertise, either by their training through school or by something like 2 groups ran performance-based assessments yesterday that had been part of the district training and are now off in their content areas running the groups. Like that's exactly what we envision
Yep.
as we work with them, is that they take it and run with it after they've had PD. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's working well. And it's saving our budget. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to run the professional development. We just have very limited budget for it. Next goal is around prioritization of standards and curriculum review. And most of these are on target. I'm a little concerned that we're spread thin. We have curriculum review efforts going on in several different areas. We had to add social studies because that framework changed. Jen, anything you want to say about any of the curriculum review areas that?
We're trying something new. So we actually posted for and have appointed people to be kind of focused curriculum people. So they'll be part of the committee, but they'll also be people that help organize it and recruit people and keep us moving with it. So we had our first meeting, and I'm happy to say, so this is just for the 6-12 right now because we're in good shape with the K-5 that we've been working on. So Lori and I were there, and all 6 secondary administrators were there, all the assistant principals and the 2 principals, and the directors, and then the point people. So we had our first meeting for how are we going forward and really keeping the movement going and getting more people engaged. Because again, we can create something, we can document something, we can top down it, but it's not going to happen in the classroom every day unless it's meaningful and people are involved to them. So, so that's the mission of this committee. So we're happy to try something new and see how that can help us move forward.
And what did we decide on the documentation of the curriculum? How are we going to track all that?
So we're definitely doing it in Google. So the teachers have been doing an awesome job, and we have groups doing, like, it's just a great way for them to share. And the intranet's been building in the back scenes, and so we have model units up there, and we'll hopefully, I'm hoping that we'll unveil it more like spring, summer, but for sure it'll be up and running for everybody to use by September for next school year.
So we're looking forward to sharing that with you. So
Yep.
the issue with curriculum revision in the past is it was in a binder and then it
Right.
sort of sat on a shelf.
Exactly.
And so if it's a living document and can be added to or revised by a team of teachers as the year goes on, we think that'll be the best.
And then
But
long
just-
term, would that be linked to then the standard performance-based assessments?
Exactly. So there are already things in there from those that people have been building as we go. The thing that we've been talking about tied to the budget with these roles that's so critical is, like, I can't, or Lori can't be doing every unit, like going through every unit to vet it to make sure that
Right.
it's aligned with all of our pieces. So, like, for instance, Catherine Dwyer, like that position vets our elementary science curriculum. So, so we work with teachers on building in the performance-based assessment and doing those pieces, but we need those coaches or those content experts that will constantly be kind of the keepers of that piece of what goes out there for our teachers, because we don't want to share things that maybe don't align with the content as they should.
Right.
So those roles are key for that, so I'd hate to lose any of those.
So moving on to the next goal, goal 4 is around ensuring that our cultures and climates are supportive, inclusive, and welcoming for all. And we had 3 action steps under that. Lori, I don't know if you want to speak to where we are on increasing district efforts to attract and retain more diverse staff members.
Yeah, I think we're in a good place because what I'm seeing is more becoming involved in the process. It's not just falling on the hands of one, and it's a team of people that are vetting and interviewing and collaborating after. So it's been exciting to see, and I just have to give a plug to the World Language Group because they've had a year. Many people, for a variety of reasons, have resigned, and Anna and her team really have done a nice job of making sure that the kids are getting what they need and the transitions have been smooth.
So, in terms of your interactions with your outside job-alike group and attending diversity fairs and that sort of thing, what's your plan for the spring?
So if all goes well with the override, then we do have our Greater Boston Human Resource Group has it's an annual, and it will be in March, and we'll attend that. Last year, there were many people that attended, I'd say close to 400. But out of that 400, it was very limited. We call it the diversity fair, but it was not diverse. And we're finding that everywhere we go. So that's in my small little group here. And then when I go out to the larger group with HR across the Commonwealth, it's a problem because of just recruiting and who's going into teaching to begin with, and then where these people are, vying for a job in the bigger cities and just not even within our, the suburbs versus urban. So we have a lot of competition out there.
So we've held off on our typical hiring cycle, obviously because of budget preparation, but I've made it really clear to everybody who is a hiring manager, all of the principals or directors or assistant principals, that they are to actively seek a diverse candidate pool by reviewing every applicant very carefully and seeking to interview a diverse group, as diverse a group as possible, and that they are to have interview teams with a focus of attracting and recruiting and retaining diverse candidates. And so that's before they make a recommendation for someone that they're bringing forward to me, that I want to be sure that they've tried to consider all candidates and make sure that we are encouraging and supportive of that effort. Sometimes the natural inclination is to interview people who went to colleges similar to our own or were from the area. And sometimes you have to take a chance on someone who might have had a more varied background, but you find through the interview that that person is a great fit. And so that's what we're really working kind of to change that culture. Because we are all more comfortable with people who are like us. And I see a lot of people coming from the same colleges in the past few years rather than seeking to interview. And it's a little more work. If we have applicants from other parts of the country, it's a little more work to expect them to come up for an interview and to make them feel welcome and to be sure that we educate ourselves about the types of colleges that they went to or what their experiences are and value that as a strength as opposed to, wanting everyone to come from Harvard or Tufts or some local colleges. So that's, part of the process.
And just to add to that, and it's also just with all candidates, thinking about the professional development opportunities they've had up to this point, where they are thinking about equity within their classroom, what that looks like. So we want them, if we get the pool that we get, understanding we value diversity and what have they done to make sure that their biases and are front and center, and they're aware as they're picking literature, designing a lesson, what that looks like and sounds like to the kids in front of them.
Because it seems to me that the problem with having a diverse pool is that a lot of kids are not having positive interactions with teachers in a way where they want to become teachers. A lot of us can remember some great experiences, whereas people who we want to draw on aren't necessarily coming into the teaching world. So the more positive our experience, the teacher's experiences with all of the kids, the more likely some more diversity will come up in the pool. It's our job to encourage that as much as it is to look for what's out there now.
Right. Jen has been continuing the sort of culturally proficient practices, professional development. It's part of the new teacher orientation focus, and you have PD planned for the summer. Are we continuing with teaching tolerance? And you want to speak to that briefly?
Budget depending.
Budget depending.
The end.
We should have a number of teachers within the district, though, who can do some of that train the trainer with the teaching tolerance at this point.
I'm
shouldn't
not
we?
sure that people feel as comfortable with it yet. I think that's a topic that generally needs a little more intensive PD, but I will say that I was, Jason and I were meeting this morning, and one of the things he was giving Stacy, our social emotional coach at the elementary, accolades for was working with windows and mirrors with the students through her training, which she got from Teaching Tolerance. So she may have known it before, but that's part of our work we've been doing with Teaching Tolerance. So I think, again, those are the ways we can carry it forward
Right.
without someone is to have some of the people specialized around that.
And the last sort of action step is a little more nebulous to measure how successful we have been. Since our budget has been so limited for book replacement, we actually haven't bought a lot of materials that are more diverse in terms of the authors or points of view. But certainly, if the override budget passes, we'll have more resources to do that. There's some money for some leveled readers in there. I know that we've got pockets where we've really focused on this, Jen, at the elementary level, as we've bought leveled readers.
Yeah, truthfully, the way we've done it best is people actually writing outside grants, because we haven't been spending money on materials. So a lot through like the multicultural, through ENCA, through WIFI. Even Andrea Phelan got her money from, last year she was the Sarah Swiger recipient, and she spent her money. Teachers got books with that. So that's mainly how we've been doing it. We don't really have.
There's a great tweet today with three of her teachers holding their new books and kind of celebrating and thanking her, which is a great tribute to those teachers and to her.
Yeah.
So even if you're not on Twitter much, look for that one.
On Twitter, I guess.
I thought it was really
I give
cute.
up. I give up.
We follow your wife on it.
We do.
We not only follow her, we read the things she posts, which are
Right.
great.
I will tell her that. Well, she probably already knows.
I'm sure she knows. We
I
communicate.
don't understand how it works,
exactly.
though.
Oh, she's fantastic. Yeah, she's
There's
fantastic.
a lot more overlap than you would think.
Yeah.
There is. Well,
there is.
she's teaching young doctors, right? And so some of the things she posts I find really helpful. So, next goal is one I hope that we are doing well, although when you're in the middle of it, it's always hard to see, and that is the FY20 and beyond budget development, which is, I think the biggest pitfall is that Ellen and I can get too close to the budget and enrollment projections and everything in special education and all the pieces that go in. And it's easy to forget that people come from the outside, don't have the same frame of reference. And so when I answer a question, I'm not always sure I'm answering the right question, because sometimes someone will ask me this, but what I really want to know is this. And so that's a little bit of a learning curve. Our typical budget has been pretty limited in terms of innovation. It's just really met our basic needs in special education and mandates and some slight enrollment increase. But so we haven't had a lot of discussion or pushback. At town meeting, we've had hardly any questions about our budget. But in this case, we're looking to develop a multi-year budget that will likely require an override. And so it's been, I just want to say, Ellen has been fantastic about turning around budgets in a very short order. So now I think we're on our maybe 13th iteration of the 17th iteration of the budget. And so I think we're doing fairly well with this. The second goal is around advocacy. I would still encourage school committee members to reach out to MASC, who's trying to do some advocacy to change the foundation budget formula, as I am with the State Superintendent's Association. Any questions on that budget piece?
Just kind of for institutional knowledge purposes, I seem to recall that we actually did at one point as a committee pass a resolution to recommend, to support
We did.
implementation of the Foundation Budget Review Commission's, did I get that sentence
Recommendations.
backwards? Recommendations.
Mhm.
Anyway, I think it was still when Michael
my first
Schindelman
year.
was on our committee. So it'd be good to,
Yep.
Do it again.
dig that out and say,
I believe we
not
did that when
only
I was
this, but-
legislative liaison. I don't know
Yeah.
who,
Yeah.
I'm not sure which of us is that right now. It might be, is it you?
No.
No? You?
Might be.
It's Susan.
That's why I'm raising this
Good.
now.
Right, 7 weeks left to take full advantage of your
But
expertise.
it's time to do whatever the next step is, or
Right.
reiterate,
Yeah.
or, yes.
Senator Lewis also presented to the select board last night some updates on the Chapter 70. And he did a really good job, so
He also used the word hope, I think.
a lot.
Seven times.
A lot. He was very positive about the governor's budget funding for circuit breaker. You've
Good.
heard it all.
The last goal is around building projects, and Susan and I and Ellen, I think, have been the three most faithful EFPBC attendees over the years.
I've done one.
And it's nice to see that Zena has joined us. Phase 1 of McCall went very well, on time and on budget. Phase 2 is well underway in terms of planning and requires a lot of support, as it is a complicated 6-classroom addition, plus the cafeteria and the athletic space underneath and the teacher workroom. The two pieces here, I think, that we have seen not so much progress on is the elevator installation here at Parkhurst, which is much more expensive than we originally thought. Although I would continue to push back and say it would allow us to access the space downstairs, which would be great. And no planning at all for central office relocation. That sort of stalled out for natural reasons. So, questions?
So it is still, well, that latter point is funded. I mean, we're all sort of focused on the big override, importantly, and not distracted by other things. And, you know, it's funny, I haven't asked Meg in a while for the update, but my understanding was the AE team was going to complete documents by January for full construction documents for this building, and then we would get an updated cost estimate. Because the early cost estimates were really on conceptual packages, so at the very least we'd have more information about what it would really cost moving forward. And then just to tie it back to the override, one of the consequences of the no override that I think you all have picked up on is cutting that $125,000 annual funding for ADA. If that happens, did you say dead in the water? Was that the expression? Yeah, that's going to go nowhere. So again, the elevator piece really is tied to the override and capital.
Ellen and I did meet with the Disability Access Committee, members of the committee, recently, just to put in a plug for the need for the elevator here. It's really it's an important addition that will allow us flexibility in the future and allow that space to be used. And every year we don't rent it out to a collaborative, we're losing considerable dollars. So. All right, any other questions on the goals? All right, so if you turn next to my goals, a lot of them are naturally tied to the district goals, and so I won't go into as much detail. The first professional practice goal is around making sure that our leadership team is strong and effective, and you can see the steps that we have taken, including the work that we did at our summer retreat. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about what I have in there. We're on page 23 of your book. So I'm very pleased with our team and how well we've worked together so far this year. The second goal is around meeting the needs of individual learners, and you can see that working through others, I think we've accomplished a great deal. We're continuing to have discussions about innovative classroom structures, multi-age, multi-grade looping. We may possibly implement one or more of those in the fall on a limited pilot basis at the elementary level. Have been speaking with some principals about that, so I'll come back with more information. Some of that is dependent on class size, teacher availability, et cetera. So I'll roll that out. The work that we're doing now on something called the District Curriculum Accommodation Plan is being led by Frances Wolf, and so that is a plan that gives strategies and suggestions for how classroom teachers can accommodate students who have different learning needs. And it's something that every district has, but a lot of people don't pay attention to, so the conversations are really important. Like, it's okay to give kids extra time if they need it. It's okay to allow students to stand up during class in the back and not always, be as compliant, and not all students can sit for long periods of time. A lot of the things we can do under a district curriculum accommodation plan that we would encourage teachers to do don't require an individual education plan. They don't require a diagnosed disability. It just requires a little bit of flexibility. And so...
And some money for furniture.
And some money for furniture. And so we will bring the DCAP to you when the draft is ready.
Do you have a time frame on that?
Jen, do you know what the time frame is on the DCAP?
No, that is one thing I'm not involved in.
I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful by late spring. Yeah.
Is that something that's required by, yeah?
All
special ed-
districts are
special ed
supposed to
law?
have one. And a lot of times it just gets lip service. So we're trying to make it a very usable document so that teachers can be reminded as they're going through the year, oh, I could try these 3 strategies that I don't use very often, if students are experiencing this level of difficulty.
Just out of curiosity, is there any coordination between that and then the TRT teams that we talked about earlier?
There should be. I mean, the district curriculum accommodation plan it's a list of strategies and or resources or programs, but it really is about a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's about not asking a child to fit in a box, but changing the shape of the box to fit the needs of the child. And that's really, in a district that's so academically high performing, I think we've sort of have a self-reinforcing belief that what we've done in the past has always worked, and it has not worked for all students. And so trying to know where that line is to allow to and encourage people to bend a little bit is important. And some people would say all students have to have the same expectations and standards or it's not fair. And there's a great book by Rick Wormelli that he was a middle school principal, really, it's called Fair is Not Equal.
Mm-hmm.
And fair means giving students what they need, and that could be different on a different day, on a different time with a different child. And it's not unfair to somebody else. I wear contact lenses. I don't see anyone here without glasses. I don't think it's unfair for me to be able to see, and that's what I need to be able to function. So we really have to kind of change our mindsets a little bit. Okay, the next superintendent's goal is around looking at schedule modifications, looking at grading practices, and looking at the effectiveness of the school start time effort. While I've had conversations with the principals about what they see as benefits, I haven't conducted the survey yet to see what students and parents and teachers think. So we will be doing that in the next month or 2. And I'll report back to you about that. The one thing that clearly, and I want to knock on wood, at the high school level, disciplinary referrals and out-of-school suspensions are significantly down from previous years, and I'm wondering if turning down the temperature a little bit allows for, I don't know if it's a cause and effect, a correlation, not a causation, but
It's only a year.
it's only a year, it's only a few months.
We'll take it.
But we'll take it. So I'm going to look at things like disciplinary referrals. I'm going to look at things like tardiness to school, absences,
School refusal?
grades, school refusal, and we'll look at, in particular, to the extent that we can, referrals to psychiatric hospitalizations and, sort of that trend, self-harm kind of trends in those direction. And then the survey will tell us as well. The Youth Risk Behavior Survey will tell us also. It's a good timing for that.
Remind us when that's due.
I think it's going to be given in March. Do you know what the date is?
March or April. Yeah.
March or April is when it's done. It's in, spring. And then we'll get it back by the end of the school year, so we'll have some good information. And then the last sort of inclusive goal we've already talked about. The McCall expansion project and my role we've talked about, and then budget we've talked about. So these, my goals align with some of the district goals. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions or take feedback or suggestions for improvement from anyone. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it here, just always feel free to set a time to meet with me. And we want to model growth as well in the central office too.
I'd just like to put in a plug and say thank you to you and Ellen this year in particular, because you're producing 2 budgets and different versions of them, and everybody's working hard, including FinCom. thought you guys did a good job last night
Thank you.
at that meeting, and my sense is that their subcommittee, their education subcommittee in particular, feels, certainly there's a lot that they've been focused on just in terms of gathering numbers for both budget scenarios. I think they feel pretty well informed, but really even more importantly, they feel comfortable reaching out to you guys when they have questions. So thank you for that.
Oh, happy to do.
Capital planning. So, Brian, we missed you at the last meeting. I won't ask you how Florida was. I wasn't sorry you were snowed out, but it wasn't too bad because now you have a completely different report for us, do you not?
It was actually fortuitous that I was stuck in Florida because I would have given you a presentation that I would have had to amend almost immediately because that was Tuesday, and then Wednesday we had our capital planning meeting, and we actually made the decisions that we had not yet made in the report that I gave to you, dated the 17th. So I'm going to avoid going through the memo, the original memo that I sent you. You guys have all had a chance to read it twice now, other than to sort of give sort of the top level of what capital planning was looking at and what the capital program in Winchester is faced with. And that is in a non-override budget. The town manager has indicated that she plans to remove about $300,000 out of the capital budget. None of this has changed since the report I sent you. $200,000 would be removed from the retiring debt. So that would be basically a reduction of projects that we can do for $200,000. And then $100,000 would be removed from the elimination of the capital maintenance fund. And I'm not sure, I don't want to bore you all, but capital maintenance fund has been very successful. It was set up, I believe, 3 or 4 years ago, and it was $100,000 that could be what was seeded at the beginning of the year and could be used to do small repairs to trucks or buildings that would increase the longevity of these. So, for instance, a truck that maybe was rusting out, we could replace the undercarriage. I'm not a truck expert, and that truck now would last another 5 or 6 years for $25,000 or $30,000, as opposed to having to buy a new one for $180,000. So, collectively, what we saw is a reduction of $300,000 to capital programs, and as a result, we had to decide how we wanted to address this. And my reason for presenting to you all is how it would impact the schools, because originally there was some talk that we might look at projects that were already funded at fall, and that would have included the Lincoln School exterior maintenance and/or the Lynch cafeteria.
Ceiling replacement?
Ceiling replacement,
Ceiling
yes.
and floor replacement?
Aside from the fact that those are both health and safety issues, the committee decided to not look back at projects that were already funded and decided to move forward. We had a large slate of projects coming in the spring, and decided that what we did is we looked at all the projects we had ranked for the spring and decided to re-rank them based on what we know now. And we re-ranked them and then looked at reducing approximately, actually it ended up being more than $300,000, and I'll explain why. But I'll explain why in a second. What we ended up voting on was the list that you see in the memo from Chair Filiu that should be was at the table in advance, which was to continue to fund the roads and sidewalks, but reduce that by a small amount. To continue to fund year 2 of the public safety radio upgrades, which is so important. To fund the public safety and the town hall generators to the tune of, it should say originally $300,000, revised $356,000, because both of those generators, turns out that the final pricing for them was higher. So we actually saw ourselves needing to cut a little bit more than $300,000. What we were unable to fund was the ADA, as we discussed. And that ADA, it was these are all hard choices, and it's not like we reveled in saying, oh, we can cut ADA. What we looked at was the ADA had been being stockpiled for using an elevator, and as we looked at what needed to get done, sort of the urgent projects, it was hard. When you're trying to decide what to cut, you had to say, that's something that's still going to be another couple of years. The main street at Highland Construction, which actually is near and dear to me, it's right behind my house, and I hear car accidents there. I've been woken up in the middle of the night to car accidents there. Ethernet cabling phase 2 at the Mystic School. There's actually a safety component to that. I won't get into it too detailed, but we're sad to have cut that. Then one project that you'll see here that actually was not in the report, but we did vote it, is the active shooter rifles for the police, public safety. They had originally asked for ballistic vests, helmets, and active shooter rifles. In the case of a situation in town, they are the first responders, and somebody with appropriate equipment could be 5 or 10 minutes away, and they would not be able to respond adequately. They were able to get the vests and the helmets through outside funding, and we have the active shooter rifles were unable to fund. The reason they weren't on the list, there's some debate whether this is considered a capital expense. And we're going back and forth.
Given the value and how close it is to the threshold?
And so Stacy has opined that each individual item must actually be above a certain threshold.
I see.
Which we don't agree with, because when you're doing ADA upgrades, you might do a project that's only $5,000, and when you're doing roads and sidewalks, you might be doing a sidewalk piece but we're working on that. It might be a policy that needs to be revised by the select board.
May I just offer, we're doing a 4-year radio replacement for police and fire, and we're not nickel and diming and look at the individual cost of one radio.
Agreed.
Same thing.
Agreed. So we don't see that any difference between that. So the good news, if there is a good news, is that at least for us, for the schools, we do not see some of the projects that we had hoped would get funded that are being funded. They're going to move forward, especially the Lynch cafeteria and the Lincoln exterior maintenance. The bad news is that the elevator, if this is the method for funding it, is yet another year off because of the lack of that funding. Now, it should be clear, I should make it clear, that if the town manager's and/or FinCom's budget finds $300,000, regardless of whether there's an override or not, we will go with our original proposal. We are not saying that this is tied to whether there's an override or not. This is tied to the funding that capital has. Yep. So while their override vote is not successful, I think that's not quite accurate. It's more, if somebody finds that money under the couch, then we'll do these projects. So.
And as a former FinCom member, do you have any sense of whether there's that money under
No,
the couch?
there's no money under the couch.
I had to call you on that.
I guess what I would say is that it has been the tradition in town that retiring debt goes to capital programs, and if that were to continue for whatever reason, I did hear that healthcare might not be as expensive. Mm-hmm. If some of that money were directed to capital, then we could reinstate some of these or all of these projects. I don't know.
Quick question.
Absolutely.
Could you just refresh my memory what ADA stands for?
Americans with Disabilities.
Oh, Americans with Disabilities Act. Okay, so that's things
So
like
it's a-
curb cuts and bathroom fixtures that are the right size for wheelchairs to get, okay.
So we set a plan,
Yep.
and the first, it was in fiscal year 12 was the first year, and we started making $125,000 payments towards, and there was an ADA, it's called,
We had an ADA transition
Transition
plan.
plan, thank you,
Yes,
thank you,
based
thank
on
you.
a consultant came into town and made some findings.
And
was
we're
that
looking to revise that
required-
plan.
Was that required by law,
So,
perhaps? Yeah, kind of.
To some degree, it
Yeah.
was, and there's a litigation component to this, which is maybe something,
all
since
right.
Lisa's
No,
joined
I
us
just-
today, it'd be worth exploring with town council. But the MAAB, which is our Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, sort of and our
Yep.
Office of Civil Rights, which interprets ADA, which is considered civil rights legislation,
Yeah.
has received complaints from citizens in the past. In fact, and you don't have to be a citizen of Winchester to file a complaint against Winchester. And towns have found in the past to find more success in sort of mitigating those complaints and working with the Office of Civil Rights or the MAAB when a town actually has a transition plan in place. Particularly
Like a
because
housing
you can
production
speak to
plan.
Yes, in other words, when it was signed in 1991, there was no impression that everyone overnight would make everything accessible just because of the lack of resources. One other plug though too, Brian, when you mentioned that transition plan, it was $1.25 million. The idea was to fund it over 10 years, but even that 1.25 is not the value of what the consultant identified. So it was underfunded to begin with.
And following up on that, I know that Meg White is looking to revise basically come up with a new plan, because we've done a number of things. Some may have been addressed with building projects along the way. So come up with a new list going forward. And I suspect it's still going to be on the, I suspect it's one of those, I don't know this. I suspect it's going to still be $1 million moving forward. I think there will always be things that we need to address. So it was unfortunate that had to be removed. I mean, these were all decisions that had to be, and again, these are recommendations to town manager. Town manager then chooses, and the town meeting ultimately decides whether these are funded. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Brian?
I'm sorry, I do have one more. And
Yeah, go ahead.
It's kind of deep background, but in the memo, you refer to there being a total of $66 million of projects that have been identified that need to be done. Just roughly, what proportion of that $66 million would be fixed if we replaced Lynch or McCall? I mean, how much is that as a school, like a school building?
That's a good question.
Does anyone know that from?
I don't know it
Yeah,
offhand.
okay.
I could look. It would not take much. There is I could determine it and get back to you on that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be
I know
great.
that Lynch has. I can think of about $4 or $5 million on the back of my hand before I even start between windows and water.
Okay.
And then.
But this committee has a report. I could probably just go
Yes.
look at the report. Okay, I'll do that.
But I can get the answers for that to you
Okay.
too. I should know. That's a question I should know the answer to, and I do not.
Okay, thank you.
I may be able to get that in the next 5 minutes if I can.
Some of
open
it's
it
in the
up.
master plan.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
that's
but
fine.
more recently, the state of the town work that we did over the summer.
Yeah,
So
okay.
let's see if I can pull that up.
Send me an email, it's fine.
Brian, thank you very much.
Sure.
Shall we move on? Policy subcommittee update from this side of the table?
Sure.
Who wants to go?
I can start. You want to just fill in wherever?
You're good to go.
Okay. So, as Dr. Evans stated, one of the district goals this year was to expand our purposeful efforts around equity and inclusion of our culture and our climates in our schools. And as part of that, the policy subcommittee went back and did a review of our policies of non-discrimination. And we found that there were a number of policies, and you had a memo on this actually at the last session. A number of our policies where we found that we were falling a bit short in protecting equal rights to LGBTQ students. And so we did a little bit of thinking about that and a little bit of research into what the state policies are. The state, as many of you know, just reaffirmed the act relative to gender identity very recently in the last election. And in pursuant to that, we also went and looked at a number of other districts in the area to see how they were addressing this. And a number of our other districts around in the greater Boston area have established an ADA, our non-discrimination policy is ADA, and they've established an ADA-1, which is a non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity policy. So as the policy subcommittee, we used some of those documents and what we've learned from the state and developed a draft of an ADA/1 for Winchester. Also calling it a non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity. The big other area that we found lacking was in athletics. So we've also identified a parallel policy that would protect those same rights in our athletics program and have drafted a policy around that. At this time, we have those draft policies actually out with our students. So the Spectrum Club at the high school and the QSA, the Queer Straight Alliance Club at the middle school, and their advisors are currently going over those policies. These are the students that would some of the students that would be most directly affected by these policies, and they are in process of creating questions for us, hopefully some tough ones, and some suggestions for us. And we will be meeting with them this week. I believe, Zena, you're meeting with one group on Thursday, and I'm meeting with the other on, I think, Spectrum on Thursday and QSA on Friday. And so we will meet with those advisors and students and get feedback from them. And I look forward to hearing what fruitful discussions they've been having on those. And after we do that, we will be able to bring those policies back to the school committee for you also to take a look at them. I believe our athletics director, Marcaria, has also already taken a look at the athletics policy for us as well. And Dr. Evans, did he give you any feedback?
He said it looked fine.
Pardon me.
Do you have anything to add to that?
You covered it up.
So the next step would be, once we've had feedback from the students, the policy subcommittee will set another meeting, if any revisions are necessary, and then have a final draft policy for your review at an upcoming meeting.
Hopefully within the next month.
Sounds good.
Questions?
Any questions? Brian,
So it's a very top level question. The rationale behind having two policies, one for athletics and one for everything else, as opposed to having it all wrapped up into one policy that would cover students and student athletes. Is there a rationale behind that? I mean, there must be.
There is. So the ADA 1 is a more general sort of, in your words, it's a more high-level policy, and it talks about students or staff members who may also be in process of transitioning, whereas the athletics policy speaks more to access to sports for students who are transitioning or have transitioned.
Okay. Thanks.
So before we move on, I have an answer to Susan's question.
Okay.
Lynch, level 1 critical needs are 8,156,000. And then for urgent level 2 needs would be 4.634 million. But that doesn't include other items that are neither critical nor urgent, but would be worn out and in need of replacement. So there is what we call a 10-year renewal number. So things that will just be worn out within 10 years. That cost is $32,231,542.
Thank you.
Which is the biggest piece, which I know is where you were headed.
Oh, I
That's
just
right.
wanted to know it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
I see that Lisa's here. I don't know if you want to do budget before the
That's a
SOI,
good idea.
in case Lisa wants to hear about
You
budget.
weren't just looking for a change of pace to have lunch, right?
Lunch hour.
I don't want to ruin your lunch.
You told us you like school committee so much, you just want to come here and have lunch and
can
hang out?
listen.
Yeah, we're going to hold you to what you said at the high school last night. Those were very nice words. Or would you like to join us at the table for our discussion on FY20? So as Lisa's coming forward, let me say, so a lot was going on last night. We had a meeting at the high school. It was a combination meeting of the high school PFA and PISC. Lisa was a featured speaker. She did a nice job kind of giving an overview of, well, it was a follow-up, really. Judy, you spoke to them a couple of weeks ago on the school side. So Lisa did an overview of the broader sort of municipal needs that an override addresses, and she also spoke about the capital needs and how the capital process works. And we had, I'd say, at least 40 people there, Lisa, going towards the back of the room. There were some good questions. We had the Finance Committee meeting last night, and then late last night, a Select Board meeting where there was yet more discussion. And I'd like to think they're getting closer, but what we heard last night, and I was pushing hard for a number, and they pushed back, is they are, first of all, no vote last night. There is a public informational meeting at the Jinx on Thursday, and we have a special town meeting coming on the 11th. And it is not the chair's plan to have a number by special town meeting, but in fact to present to special town meeting, get feedback, Q&A from the floor, and then vote. I heard on the 15th until FinCom pointed out that's your deadline, and then I think they were going to walk that back a full day. Is that right? So they may be voting on February
whole day to do
14th.
it.
Yeah, whole day.
So no pressure. Let me, since Lisa's with us, any comments you want to make sort of in the aggregate, looking at the overall FY20 budget development? You had some documents at the table last night, for instance, we just hadn't seen. So I think we were trying to pick up by ear what that looks like.
Yeah, the documents provided last night were the budget detail for the town document, so it's literally the 6 line items that you see in the budget projections are now 50 pages of detail in terms of, what everybody spends on their copier machine, for example. So that, that really is the meat of the town side budget. And I think anybody who's looking at it, I don't have it here, but you'll see that it's not a lot of difference between fiscal year 18 and 19. There's, you can tell where the differences come from in terms of potential COLAs or steps or contracts. You might see some slight changes here and there, but most of those are explained by the additions or the cuts that we might have to make in both budget scenarios. So those have been gone over in detail. I think one of the things that we're trying to get at is to look at this comprehensively. So not just to look at a number, but to make sure that we get input from as many people as possible. Hence, I think the select board's desire to hold off to get that feedback and then to consider that feedback in their vote. We're also trying to talk about things like the senior tax relief program, whether we can expand or even double the amount of incentive as well as the number of people that are getting these incentives. I think it's important to make sure that we have something that addresses a lot of people's concerns. I don't think we can solve them, but I think at least if we can acknowledge and address them. One of the things that we're doing now from a technical standpoint, the special town meeting on Monday is not something where it's not a traditional town meeting. There is no vote. There is no motion. I think there's some confusion that we're finding around that. So we certainly don't want people to come on Monday thinking that there's going to be a vote and then get very angry and then have a whole debate just on the vote. So we've been in the process this morning about compiling sort of frequently asked questions or questions that we think might be pertinent for people to know beforehand. So if you have any thoughts or if people are coming to you and asking you specific questions, we're trying to keep it to kind of like a 1 or 2 pager and then disseminate that, either via email and or put it on the website and or handout as people are even walking into town meeting, just so it's there.
In other words, what the purpose is that what you were saying, and how one imagines the evening will go?
Yeah, so for example, just on the vote thing, so
Sure.
a frequently asked question would be, are we voting on anything? Are we voting on the override at the special town meeting? And the answer is no. This is a meeting to report out, hear concerns, and also maybe a side note about how, because it is the budget, and because our bylaws say that we can't vote on the budget before this specific date, we're not allowed to do that. Without sort of getting too nitty gritty, it's trying to figure out how to provide information and kind of align expectations so we can keep the conversation focused on what we're trying to do and not get bogged down in process. You should have done this first, or we need to do that. So, because that can easily happen.
So for one thing that just jumps out in my mind is, and I think Lance did a good job setting the stage for this, but of course that fall town meeting, I think the chair was pretty clear in saying this is an initial report and you'll be hearing back from us. I believe he introduced that concept of a special town meeting to provide more information after more work had been done. That may be a way to frame it, is simply to say, as we shared with you in the fall, we're coming back with more detailed information to get your input and get your feedback. Thoughts, questions for Lisa on that point in particular?
I have a clarification. I didn't hear Lance say exactly what you just said, Chris, about not having a number or a vote. I heard him say that we are going to have a suggested number or a smaller range, and we go in with that and hear feedback, but pretty much we know that we're in between 9.2, 9.5 to 10. I feel like what's expected of us is to go in with that mindset. Would you agree?
He did say that there was a narrower range, and range is probably somewhere between $9 and $10 million.
So there is some sort of cohesive message around that it's a 9 to 10 operation and 2 capital. There's no real debate about that 2 million, right? For capital?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any debate.
But just to be clear, that I think that clarity of that point came from the back of the room last night when Lance asked the chair of the finance committee, because then I asked the select board, is there a range you're comfortable with tonight that we can then begin talking about? And I heard no. I heard, wait, let us do our job, let us get through special town meeting. Did I mishear?
I think he
Lance?
prefaced it with the range, yeah,
I think there was a statement that the range was narrowing,
yeah.
coupled with the, we're not comfortable having that be the range that's publicized.
But he said that that range will be brought to town meeting. That's what I heard.
Yes. I mean, the PowerPoint slides, the handouts, all have numbers associated with them that adhere to that particular range at this point in time.
Judy, are you presenting at that special town meeting?
I don't know if I'll be asked to speak. The moderator would have to recognize me as a non-town meeting member. I have been in contact with Lance and provided him with some slides. And we have a pretty comprehensive FAQ that's multiple page that you've probably seen, and if you haven't, we can send it to you again. When we started this conversation in some of the working groups, Susan in particular worked hard on, and Chris worked hard on an FAQ, so you might be able to pull some things from that. It seems to me that the issue, again, I'm not a municipal finance expert or a select board member. The issue is not what the number is. The number is pretty clear in terms of defined need. Is there an appetite to ask for that number, and or is there question about how much should be spent in the first year, second year, and third year? So the feedback is primarily, I think, going to be about is it reasonable? Is the request reasonable? But the folks on the municipal side and the school side, I think, have worked hard to justify what we think the number is. So I don't think the number itself is in
Right, that's my point.
contention for most people. Some town meeting members may not even be aware of
Right, I
the
know
play
that.
around this, and so will need to educate themselves. And so I think the question is going to be how much, how fast, what's the impact on the tax bills? And that should really be the finance committee, the school committee, the select board members who participated in this actively should all have a really good sense. And of course, Lisa, even as the newest player on the team, should have a really good sense for what the need is. It's a need that, if town meeting members have been paying attention, has been articulated very explicitly at least the 3 town meetings before this that I have attended, both fall and spring, and by the previous town manager, and by the select board, and by the finance committee. And so there's universal agreement that we have insufficient funds. The question is, how much are we willing to ask for, and what will be the consequence if we get less? Does that make sense?
Yep. Other questions, comments? So while Lisa's here, can you maybe just take a moment to talk about the Finance Committee meeting last night, since that was all about the FY20 budget? Lisa was upstairs with her group while you
Sure.
were downstairs. Can you maybe share the kind of the questions that you got from the group?
So in some ways, this is a very atypical budget because we've got an austerity budget, non-override budget, we've got the override budget. And every year we go and we meet with the Finance Committee. And the members of the Educational Subcommittee of the Finance Committee are well-versed in all of the budget drivers, especially special education, enrollment, and modest program improvement. They sort of have heard the same story year after year. We'd like to do this, we don't have the money to do this. They've heard the pleas for more support for social emotional learning. And so as I reviewed both budgets, I think there weren't a lot of questions about what we specifically need. There continue to be some questions about growing special education population, out-of-district costs, and why are those going up? And I think there's clarity now that regardless of what the increase percentage is, that we will be adding 1 special education teacher and up to 8 teaching assistants, and we will be increasing out-of-district tuition and transportation by slightly less than $500,000, no matter what else we do. And that does have an impact on our overall ask. If the austerity budget is a budget we land with, it looks like a net reduction of fewer teachers than actually we're going to need to reduce, because we're adding FTE versus FTE, right? If you add a number of teaching assistants and a teacher in special education, and then you lay off 15 other teachers, it looks like you've had a less of an impact. And so I'm a little concerned about just having a clear message about that. That need to meet special education mandates supersedes any other aspect of the budget, even at the expense of regular education or class size. So we went through both versions of the budget last night. I sense that the school committee vote as we progress on whatever the override budget is. There'll be an expectation that we will reduce from the 846 to something lower than that, either by deferring some of the ads to out years or outright not filling some of the positions. I think that people feel that 8.46 is a big ask, particularly in the first year. And so we started, I want to remind everybody, slightly under 10, because everything on the list that we really need was on that initial list. We pulled back and pushed some things into a multi-year phasing. But there are always naturally some things that shift a little bit. And so Ellen and I have been working on sort of a prioritized list of if we were to have reductions, where we would recommend. And clearly, every year this is a pretty dynamic discussion at school committee, because it's your responsibility to set the bottom line number and have some influence on what the components of that are. So a couple of things just from the get-go that are not painful, that are good news. So looking at the enrollment projections, we have one placeholder for an elementary enrollment-related position. I'm pretty comfortable removing that. And so that's an initial off-the-top save of one position.
60,000.
60,000. We also have been notified of a couple more retirements, and it's my expectation that we may not need to fill one or both of those positions, which could lead to another savings of about 166,000. And so I think we can cut the 8.46 down through retirements, and every one we get is another 40,000 or so that we save by replacing with a less experienced teacher. So eliminating the enrollment-related position and eliminating not replacing two retiring positions, even though in a normal year we would replace those positions. I think we can pare down the 846. Everything else on the list I think is important. And so I'm open to your questions or suggestions about further reductions. In your budget book, in the summary sheet, you've got the anticipated cash value of each of the ads, and the summary sheet that is in section 2 under the 846 budget. So they're reminding there are 2 pages. First page is just personnel on the bottom section. The second page is the expense side. And so if you go down the expense side, obviously special education tuition and out-of-district transportation are the big nut. There's also a pretty significant dollar amount, $211,000 for technology infrastructure upgrades and replacement. And I don't know that I've done a very good job explaining that, so Jen has been closest as the de facto technology director. If we were to reduce the 211, Jen, what would the impact be?
I mean, it's a big issue because we are 2 years now of underfunding, and
Yep.
so we will, if we continue down this path, we will end up in the same place we were in X number of years ago before Powered Up, where, because the stuff starts to fall apart behind the scenes, you don't see that in the front line in the classroom. And then it ends up that it just compounds itself each year when we're not replacing servers, when we're not replacing wireless access points, those aren't even devices, that's just the behind the scenes to make it run. And, we're $36,000 in the hole in software right now. And we cut a ton of software that the teachers could use this year. And we just did what we minimally need to make things run. And, that's, cutting more will just put us more in the hole with it.
It'll put us in a position where we got to talk about some revenue source for technology.
Exactly.
And yet, what we're here to talk about is a revenue source with a question in the spring. So this is
Right.
the time.
So I wouldn't recommend reducing that line. I think the other thing to keep in mind as you're making decisions about the enrollment-related increases that I've asked for in the 846 is that there's been pent-up demand at the middle and high school, that we haven't added staff members there in proportion to the increase in population. So while the enrollment increases at the lower grade levels are more stable, we'll have 40 more students at the high school next year, just moving up from the middle school. While other districts may have larger class sizes because, of lack of resources, it isn't something that we've been prepared to handle long-term here. Our classroom, Chris could talk about the size of our classrooms. The high school classrooms, we bought 24 desks for the classrooms. They're sized for 24 students. The classroom sizes at McCall are undersized in comparison to some other districts. And so I can tell you that nearly every world language class at McCall has 26, 27, or 28 students. And when I walk in there to do my walkthroughs, Jen can speak to the same thing, that those are crowded rooms, and giving students the individual attention they need to speak a world language, our target would be below 24 for all of those. But at McCall, the class sizes, there are 108 classes of 25 or more students and 28 PE classes, more than 30 students. You'll always have more than one PE class in the gym, which means you could have 60 or 90 students in the gym at one point playing kickball. And I've tried to walk through there, and it's not. I think it's a safety issue, frankly.
At McCall, this is the
At McCall.
regular size, one-size gym, not
Right.
at the high school.
Not the
where we
high
have
school,
two
which has a
gyms.
double, right.
And I appreciate that you prepared that so well in memo form that we were in a position last night. We shared a lot of that with the select board, and I know you were sharing some of that with FinCom as well.
And at the high school, there are 24 classes with 30 or more students, and that's, again, not typical for us, which means that for some people, particularly in math, there are 6 or 8 classes of math that are over 30. There are some teachers who are carrying student loads of, between 120 and 140 students, which means giving individual attention and helping to support students who are struggling is harder to accomplish. It came up in negotiations. There was a request to put a cap on the total student load of individual teachers, and we did not add that in the contract, but clearly the teachers are seeing that they're feeling that there's an expectation for a lot more parent communication, individual attention, lots of feedback on written work, et cetera, that is just becoming untenable with the numbers that we're seeing at the middle school and high school. And so I think I didn't do a very good job articulating the stress that we're feeling. The core classrooms are on target at the middle school. It's all of the others. It's the health class, the PE class, the tech class, the computer class, the language class are all over our target. And so if you want to see the class size report, I can send that to you just to sort of eyeball it. But I really think that we've done a good job holding the line at the elementary level, and we haven't been able to at the middle and high school.
Can I ask you a question? From the numbers I see, we have currently 4,769 students. The last year's number is 4,662, a difference of 107. Have we grown by 107?
So, no.
You said the DESI.
Right. So there are several different ways to look at enrollment. So there are some enrollment that includes preschool students. So we have about 100, depending on the time of year. 84 right now. By the end of the year, as they turn 3, about 100 typically, or slightly over. And often in your enrollment, you won't see the preschool students included, like at the DESE, for example. That's a K-12. The enrollment on the DESE website is 2017-18. It says 2018. So it means that's the number that we sent them in October of 2017. Okay. So they're always a little bit behind, and that number doesn't necessarily align with our number that we're using for the
October of 17?
So it's 17-18. So
that's a year old.
So that's a year old, okay. And it doesn't include all of our students. It doesn't include out-of-district students. It doesn't include the Winchester residents we service for special education who are not enrolled in our school but do walk in or go to other private schools where we have to provide services for them. It doesn't include some of the numbers don't include the group of kids, maybe it's 8 or 10 students, who are post-grad, kind of older than 12th grade, doing a lot of vocational work, but we still have to educate them, and they can be high-cost students. So.
Give me an apples to apples.
So in general, our numbers from last year to this year are pretty flat, but up at the secondary level. And so they're, because depending on what category of student you're counting on any given, so you probably saw that the number that I sent you in my monthly enrollment report was 12 up from the previous month. You know, and you see there's 4 additional high school students registered, there are a few more preschool students, there are and there are students at any point in time who are out of district on an interim educational assessment, 45-day assessment, who may not be here, may not come back. So there's there's in and outs. There are people who move in at any given time. So in general, our enrollment at the high school especially has continued to climb. And the class going into 6th grade is 50 students more. The 5th grade class is about 400 than the class that
is graduating.
That is graduating. So
Yes.
our enrollment right now, if I were to, categorize it, is the students in the district who are moving up are going to mean middle and high school will get larger for a number of years because those classes are larger than the ones they're replacing. The sort of one-year trend is that we're getting a lot more move-ins for high school especially. People coming in the middle of the year, people coming at the beginning of the year. Very atypical for a district like Winchester. People would move in elementary school and kind of work their way up.
So if I wanted to write something that is like apples to apples and show that movement but steady, I can use this latest report here.
That's from October.
When you say apples, what is,
So,
just
like-
for my benefit, can you say
okay.
what is it you're asking?
So here we have that on page 9 of the budget book, we have
Yeah.
that K-5 is stable.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say 6 to 8 is projected to slightly increase to 1,112. From what? And then the high school, the grade 9 to 12, increase by 42 students. That one tells me how many students. The middle school didn't. So you know what I mean? Like, just a consistent picture, because I want to be able to tell someone like Dave Rico, who asked very clearly,
Right.
why is the total flat, and show him that there is that kind of this wave that's going, even though our kindergarten classes are steady.
So can I just interject? So
Sure.
because Mr. Rico is a member of the select board and he's asking as a member of the board, Susan and I have been working on information for Lance to inform his board. I think what I could do, Judy, is we could share some of these tables with the school committee so we can all see.
I'm not
some information.
asking to go to Dave Rico and explain anything. I'm not talking about him specifically. It was just a question he asked.
Sure.
I just want something clear to take to anybody who's talking to me and say, look at the numbers.
So what I'm saying
Is
is,
this-
we have that and we can share that.
But to Zena's point, if we're sharing something like this, it's not a simple
story.
answer. So if there's a way to
I want to be
Pull
able to
out the
do
most
it so
important
you don't have more
information,
work
that'd
to
be
do.
good.
Yeah.
I'm asking,
Well, the
is this the right chart for me to look at rather than the others?
Right. So, 2 things on this. These are the historicals if you want to see what our trends are. So if you look at the total column
Uh-huh.
and you just go down the total column, you can see where our growth has been. And what the patterns of our growth have been. And you can see what the trends are, high school, middle school, K to 8.
Okay.
If you go to the DESE website, you can look at their year-to-year enrollment reports, and it's got a number. It's going to be a slightly different number than this, but the trends are very similar. You can go all the way back to 1990.
2002.
we've compiled that in some attempt to have a, historical trends based on what you find at the DESE website.
Right.
So I don't want to have to explain to people that
Don't
this
need to.
number doesn't include this.
Yeah.
I just want to take this accurate number
These
from
are-
your enrollment numbers and say, you can see how it's shifting. So I can use this
Sure.
latest chart. That's the
Right.
most
Right.
accurate story.
So Chris, thank you, Chris, reviewed the 3-year historicals, and there is one correction from the previous one that I had given you. In 6th grade, in 2015-16, it had said 383
Yeah.
students, it's now
So I have the new
363.
one.
You have
Okay.
the new one.
Yeah.
The rest of the numbers are accurate as far as I know.
Okay.
These were October 1st enrollment numbers. So as our numbers go up and down over the course of the year, they're going to change, but
Right. That
apples to
doesn't.
apples.
I don't need to complicate the story,
Yeah.
which is what.
Yeah, I think this is
felt.
pretty accurate.
I just want to have it clear. So, thank you.
Sure.
And maybe this is, I don't want to make it any less clear, so I hesitate to ask this question. But my question is the sort of shaded area, which is this year that we're in the middle of.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the numbers from October?
Yes.
Okay.
So the numbers for next year, I think this is important to share.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers for next year are based on the 3-year average. So we took the October 2018 number and applied the 3-year ratio to it, and that's where the 2019-20 numbers come from, except kindergarten. And you can see that I've estimated incoming kindergarten to be 330 students. We currently have 318 students in kindergarten. There were a large number of students last year who were age eligible for kindergarten who did not come. And so I bumped it up by about 15 students, thinking that perhaps those students are going to enroll this year. They were redshirted, as many people seem to like to do. There were a number of multiple births, twins and triplets, and so people didn't want to split their children up, or maybe they were developmentally delayed because of medical issues, a variety of issues. So kindergarten could be anywhere from typical, 310 to 320 to 330. How they're spread across the district, it will really influence how many teachers we need. But if we came in with one fewer kindergarten than I have projected district-wide, that would be a good news story, and we'd save a kindergarten teacher and half an aide salary. So we only add the teachers at the elementary level for the specific sections that we need. And at the middle and high school level, the enrollment-related increases that I've outlined are really all sort of pent-up demand. And anticipate that we're going to grow at the same rate and not any larger based on any building projects.
And that's what we were telling them, yes.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Can I offer something, and I will share this with you because I think it provides at least something of what you're looking for, which is that year-over-year increase. You can use it however you like. For everybody's benefit, when you look at the pre-K through 12, so this includes the pre-K numbers, just looking at the 4 years from FY 15 through 18, which is actually 4 years, the increase was almost 1.5% over the prior year, then over 1.9, then down drastically to 0.7, and then it swung back up to 0.84, which is why that 3-year ratio that Judy has highlighted is so important, because although we're a town that's continues to be in a period of growth, in any given year, it moves around a lot. And even if you go way back to like the aughts, right? So 2002 through 2010, when we were absolutely exploding, we were seeing 10-year growth rates of over 27%. Even during that crazy time, if I look at 07 through 2010, we saw growth of 3.73% 1 year, and the next year only 1.14, and then it swung back up to 2.5. So it moves around a lot. But we've got this, and I'll share it with you.
I guess my point is, I want to caution us to not so delve into the weeds with the people we're trying to explain this to, because they are so frustrated. They don't care.
I thought you were asking
For
about
me, I'm very
Okay.
happy to know the historic, but
So, I'll send it to you.
I've heard a lot of frustration about how much we're complicating. There's a story, there's a growth, and the more you're delving into the weeds with the residents, they're losing their minds, and they just don't want to hear anymore. The simpler story is that exactly what you were telling me is that yes, the kindergarten rate seems to be steady for second grade, but now what you're seeing is that old growth going up into the high school and middle school. That's it. They don't need the percentages
Yes.
because I'm telling you, like after our meetings, people are just like fed up with all our explanations because we know too much, and by
We're
we I
trying
mean
too hard.
the historical data.
Okay. So, the other thing I'd like just to draw attention to about this budget is, thank you to Michelle, who did a little detective work and looked up what the comparable world language and performing arts offerings were in other communities. And I think this is really helpful because it points out that for the most part, other districts offer non-Western language. Almost all of them offer Mandarin. And all of them start, when middle school starts, and in the districts where middle school starts in 7th, they started in 7th, but most of the rest do start at either in elementary or 6th. So it's good reinforcement. It's just not just me saying that our students are being shortchanged. It is just a general expectation in other districts that students will start language study at least when they begin middle school. And so I just thought that chart was helpful. So thank you, Michelle.
That's great. That's great.
Terrific.
And I have to say, the source is just other districts' websites. That's as reliable as the information gets, but that's digging through their course catalogs and.
Lie to you.
All right.
Okay,
So-
so feedback on the budget or questions? I think Brian has a question.
I
Yeah, go
did
ahead.
have a question. Was at the beginning of this conversation, and I'm trying to remember exactly what we said, that we had 2 additional retirees.
Since this budget was
And
developed.
you said you didn't plan on filling those positions?
So they are specialist positions that if we need to reduce the budget
Ah, okay.
from the 8.46, that would be the first place I would go. It wouldn't be my ideal outcome, but it could be a place to go so that we would have fewer layoffs if we don't have the 8.46. I just wanted to make sure that I offered that option to you. Classroom teachers have to be replaced. If a classroom teacher retires, resigns, those positions have to be filled. If we don't fill specialist positions, it means other people just have to work that much harder to try to meet the needs of students, and then we can't service all the students we would like to as an intervention. But that would be the first place I would go if you needed to reduce this, to make it more palatable to get FinCom support for the overall budget increase.
So filling those positions is in fact included in the 8.46?
Yes.
Okay, I got it now.
I wanted to offer you a little bit of an easier reduction before we get down to, really, Ellen and I sat and I looked line by line. I said, oh, can't do that. Oh, and so there wasn't a lot of room to go.
This is the same 8.46 that we voted
Yes.
back in
Right.
January. It's the
Yes.
same amount.
Yes.
Exactly the same. There's no
for-
changes.
What is it, 4 million? Or 2
Or
million?
255?
Yeah.
Okay. 4,255.
Is that too much
But
into the weeds?
Two is
But-
too
No, no, no.
How do
Call
you,
it 4?
how do you memorize
you happy.
everything?
Okay, 255.
He said it a couple times last night.
4.255.
Oh, okay.
But the summary has a date of February 1st, so I
people
think
asked.
some things have shifted a little
Yeah.
that I don't know any.
No,
they
so-
have.
There was
Okay.
one classification that we changed.
So we had a question because the original 846 summary sheet that I gave you
Uh-huh.
showed the reductions from the 997.
Okay.
So it had some lines that were 0 or grouped in a different way. And so someone said, this number doesn't align with this number. And so we said, oh, I think here we're calling it program improvement and not enrollment or special education mandated. So we tried to clean it up so things were in the right category, but the bottom line number is the same and there are no changes to the components. It's just organized in a way that I think is easier to understand in terms of particularly special education and what's program improvement and what's enrollment related. And some are both.
Yeah.
But-
And I think I misspoke last night at the select board meeting when they just wanted a bottom line of how many teachers. And I said 10, thinking that that included the world language expansion. But the world language is an additional 3.
Correct.
Okay, so I did misspeak. Okay. Well,
So I sent a slide to Lance to say, because he had
Okay.
he had it incorrect on his too, but I can understand that, because if you look at this, you're not sure,
yeah.
you know, what is added. And having teacher level positions are about $60,000 and TA positions are about $25,000. So when you're looking at FTEs, an apple is not an orange, and so that's
Right.
important.
Yes, no, I know the FTEs can
Distinction
make
as
you
well.
insane.
Yeah,
And
the
then we
FTEs
also
are not
sort
the
of
same.
quickly pivoted towards, there were some questions, Judy, about what's in the budget that's building-based, so there's some questions about the call. Some of those are easy to pick out the way you framed them, but then there's some other investments that in fact are shared across the district. So like BCBA, for instance, we talked about.
That's a
Um,
district-wide.
That's
Right.
district-wide. So,
Right.
you know, we did our best to say, well, here's some examples at McCall, but then there are some others, you know, outside of that. There was a question about, it was a follow-up question about foreign language
Mhm.
expansion to sixth grade, and
Mhm.
the consequence of the effect of offering world language in sixth grade on high school upperclassmen. And I think not all of us in the room maybe understood the question, or we understood it a little differently. So I did commit to circle back with Jackie and with
Jackie had a
you.
question?
Jackie had a question.
I think I remember.
I think actually
Yeah.
others in the room thought the question was, if you offer world language at sixth grade, might those kids then not be taking world language for a year, for that
Senior
last year in high school?
Right.
I did my best to describe our graduation requirements, college, university requirements. I didn't think that there would be an impact, but I think what she was after was,
Would you
might-
save on the other
Is-
end?
Would you save
what
money?
would you save on the other end? And all I
Right.
can think of is study halls and open ends, and I don't imagine that we're just going to be cutting kids loose.
So, other high-performing...
fair? Is that-
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I mean, I can answer that sort of, it's just a math game, right, in terms of, students have to take X number of classes, and you need X number of teachers to teach them. So whether it's world language or they're taking someone else, it's not a savings in the budget, because they'll be taking something else instead. However, so we had a large number of students achieve exam and showed that they were literate in 2 languages. And for some of our students, and we're even trying to encourage our rapidly growing dual language students, our students who have English as the second language, to achieve the seal of biliteracy, with English being English and another language being their 2 languages. So that's a good achievement. But our students, many of whom take AP world language tests, have a whole year less of instruction, or possibly 2 years less if you start in 5th grade, than their peers in other districts. And so we're cramming essentially the same curriculum into fewer years. So I would assume that many students will continue to study all the way through the end of senior year, and/or pick up a second language when they get to high school, which would be great. When I went to Somerville High School, I had the opportunity. I started in 7th grade with French, and then by the time I got to my junior year, I was able to pick up Spanish as a second language, and I had topped out at French. French 5 stopped in my junior year. With us, I think it'll extend, and it'll just be a more proficiency-based model, and not so much the traditional French 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what we're trying to do is give students the opportunity to accelerate through the curriculum, or slow things down if they wish, and separate into sort of novice, intermediate, high intermediate, and so forth, instead of grouping students just by years. That's a very sort of textbook-based approach as opposed to a proficiency-based approach. So again, I'm probably in the weeds on this, but if we want to
I like how
encourage
she looks at me.
preparation for our kids as global citizens, I'd love them all to take 2 languages at the high school, or at least a couple of years of another language, and to grow that way, because the world is flat and they need to see what the rest of the world looks like. The study of world language is not just speaking another language, but knowing another culture.
And I would maybe even say that it could potentially lower college costs, because if they get a certain level on AP exam, they don't have to take a class or 2.
Yeah. I graduated a year early from Tufts because I didn't have to take
I'm going to
French.
say that's kind of changed.
Yeah, I was gonna say, a lot of colleges
Usually,
You have to
more
take a
often
test,
than not, they say,
and-
you
yeah.
get the credit, now you can take the next level class.
Well, that's what I mean. I
Yeah.
could save
Yeah.
on having to take a more basic class.
You'll save money either way.
You save money, yeah.
I guess the other thing is it gives our students some confidence in love of language and other cultures, and so I think particularly the inclusion of a non-Western language is a huge hole in our.
I know.
Right.
Yeah, I have to say, this chart has definitely convinced me that things are changing in other districts since the last time we looked at this. It was, we were saying, well, lots of districts already have Mandarin. It was like, well, if you really look, it's really not a lot. This is more just straight down the line.
I would have been open to Japanese or Arabic
Same,
or
no.
something, but when we did the survey, 17% of our students are Asian in the district now. Some of them probably already speak Mandarin fluently or go to the Chinese language school.
Yeah.
My own children, 2 of my children picked up Japanese as another language when they went to college, in addition to Mandarin, and 2 of them actually have a Chinese minor, which is kind of cool, because they were able to take it and be exposed to it in high school.
Well, you can always just watch anime. That's fine. I had a question about just before we get too far away. This book doesn't have, and maybe that's, makes sense, but it doesn't have what you had in the slides about the things you were going to sort of push out and do, the additions you're going to make in FY '21 and '22.
Yes. Well, it kind of does.
Oh, maybe I missed it. Okay.
So page 15,
My cold is worse than I thought. Okay.
hot off the presses.
15.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah, Betty.
No, I do. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
missed it. Unmet needs. Okay.
So this lists the deferred staffing increases that I would like to ask for in FY '21, and then talks about FY '22 and '23, mainly for the adjustment counselors, sort of adding one a year, and the full day K aides, making them full-time in FY '21. So it doesn't present it in the same format, but that's the information if anyone's looking for it.
Okay.
And we'll post this, on the website so people can read
That'd be awesome.
this glorious budget narrative.
Memo, I
Yeah,
really
the
appreciated
narrative.
it.
You like the
The
pictures too?
narrative.
Especially my Lynchies.
So there was a, one of the questions that came up last night was, what are we getting for $6 million? Which was sort of an awkward moment because sort of coming to the table thinking we're talking exclusively about enrollment and me not realizing, where's my budget book? Oh, it's behind my laptop. So that's why you
Oh,
saw
that
me
was
get up
good
from
that
the
you had it,
table
yeah.
last night.
Yeah.
Like, wait, is it fourth? So the conversation quickly went towards, the fact that what's not in our budget are things like healthcare, our utility bills, share of OPEB towards, the school, retired school employees and so forth. So I thought there was some good conversation about
Custodians.
how all
and,
in,
yeah.
the school budget represents more like that 2/3. So in my mind, and maybe Lisa, this is a message that could be really clearly articulated for special town meeting and maybe even for the 7th if Lance is already working on this, is to be clear about where we get to that 2/3. That was something that Ms. Welch was particularly interested in. She believes that we have a community that generally understands what sort of proportion of the overall municipal budget schools are. And
Yeah.
is this an ask that kind of comports with that ratio? Anyone answer the question or have a comment?
I did, but that wasn't about that.
So probably a good time for me to get in the weeds again and say that the per pupil expenditure comparison district to district is truly apples to apples and includes all town expenses that go to support the schools, including healthcare, other benefits, a portion of Lisa's salary, et cetera, DPW,
Crossing guards.
everything that goes to support the schools is
that's
included.
good to know.
So that's good to know. Okay.
So I had a procedural question. We've approved this budget.
Mm-hmm.
We've approved the 3.8. 3.8.
3.8.
I learned last night that at the special town meeting, there will be 3 budgets presented. That was my understanding. So there will be one budget that we have not had any, we have not approved being presented. So I just wanted to understand what's happening, especially since we have the town manager in the room
Yeah,
right
that was
now.
right at the end of the discussion, and I didn't really understand that.
So the forecasting spreadsheet that I know I can send it to all of you. It's a tool that's, I guess, has been used from year to year. This particular spreadsheet has something called level, which others have said it's level service, it's level staffing, it's basic budget.
Basic.
So these are kind of the terminology. It's built into the town budget as the request, because I requested specifically that department heads give me a level staffing budget. So it was already prepared. So it was very easy for me to just plug in that number when asked about that. So that number exists specifically for town departments, and there's also I would say a total number for the schools, which is like 53 million and some change. That's plugged in there as a 5.78% that, I think Judy and Ellen could probably talk more about, but, so that number is in there, so really without the kind of detail or discussion that any of us have had.
So a
the
level
other
services
budgets.
number.
It's not level services.
Level staff.
It's not,
It's level staffing.
Well, it can't
it can't be level staffing.
It's the budget without the reduction of the 15 to 18 teachers.
Here it is.
Right?
But with the increase, required special ed
Yes.
increase.
Yes,
So it's
but the increase.
So it's not level staffing.
not level staffing, it's level.
And it's not quite
level
levels.
experience for our students.
It's not level experience for
Still
our
not level
students.
So
Experience.
it's not level anything then.
Right.
It's the budget that doesn't require me to lay off 15 to 18 teachers. That's all.
It's a non-cut budget.
Except
It's
that
not
that would,
Yeah,
the
it's-
fees
This
and
is,
the.
and this is the problem, which is it's
not
not quite
level.
any of those things. Some things are
Right.
level staff, some things are level service, some are pretty basic, and some, some have similar experiences. It's our best effort, and our judgment call to say that this is the budget that would essentially be the budget if you said, don't try to rock the boat, don't try to change anything, just delay everything for a year. This is kind of what we would put together, whatever you want to call it.
So, but when you say don't rock the boat, it would still require an override, right? So I thought,
Oh,
and
this
you're right,
was
Brian,
the
it was towards the end of the meeting. I thought Mr. Arico,
This is
who
where
brought
the
it up,
override
described it as level services.
Smaller.
Is there some unanimity among the board members about what they're calling it? And if
No.
that is, okay, because if that, we spoke earlier about confusion and trying to avoid it. I think what you call it matters.
Yeah.
I heard someone say level services last night. I didn't hear level experience. I
That was
didn't.
my own choice. Of
No,
trying
and
to
I
come up with
didn't.
the
I
word.
didn't hear non-cut. I'm just offering that up myself. So, but we've used that expression before, level services, in identifying elements of a budget, and I wonder, is that what we should be doing here to give Lisa the right information, so that it really is just within at least that presentation, so it's apples to apples between schools and municipal. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
I don't see any point in putting forward a budget that's going to not meet our needs and then
Yeah.
not give us sufficient funds in the following year.
Right.
Which is why we didn't vote on it either.
No, and I'm not suggesting we vote it. I want Lisa to correct me if I'm wrong. I think the interest among the board is,
Suggesting we don't
so
present.
if one budget is an austerity budget and we're sinking, and another budget is where we're reaching our goals, we're catching up to where we've fallen behind. And this came up in that first, the session at the high school, I heard from many town meeting members who were asking, well, so what if you're treading water? In other words, something,
Anybody off?
if you're giving the town two options, I'm not talking about on the ballot, I'm just saying like at a special town meeting, if there's an override ask and that's contrasted with a cut, my sense is some people are having a hard time judging the ask against the cut. They'd like to more understand what that ask is against
Something else.
something else, which I think people call the level services. Not that the school committee would advocate level services, but to help them understand what that delta is. That's, I think, what I've inferred from my discussions with the chair of the board. Is that about right?
Yes, so there's no level service, level staffing, treading water, basic budget that's being presented at any of the meetings. It exists
Okay.
on paper, but it's not, as far as I know, part of any presentation.
It's not a proposal.
Correct.
Right.
It's just there as a point of information.
Okay.
So the way we got from the basic needs budget is we cut $1 million to get to the 3.8. So if you look at it, it's just a numbers game. It's a reduction of about 762,000 in personnel and
Right.
227 in expense. You add that back in, you don't reduce that personnel, and that's where you get back up to 5.7.
Right.
So, but it doesn't, and it gets us the special education, additional staffing.
We have all the mandated special
And
ed.
it's only the very minimal needs. Certainly, everyone asks for more than I have on here.
Right.
And it meets our out-of-district tuition and transportation increase. That's all it does. If we're going to have 40 more kids at the high school next year, that means more classes over 30 or classes cut. Every year we push off, as Jen says, about technology. It's the same with personnel. there is still an unallocated account that assumes what the settlements are gonna be for other represented groups. The swings in that amount are smaller because they're smaller numbers. People make less and there are fewer of them. That's still a little bit of an unknown in the budget. Could decrease a little bit. But in general, we know what our expenses are. We know who the students are sitting in front of us and what they'll need next year. And a 5.7 is a cut budget under any circumstances. Things will not happen that we need to have happen. But we can't fund that without an override in any case. So seems like a little bit of a moot point to me, but I understand where people are coming from. It should be pretty clear on this summary sheet what they're getting for the 8.46. I think we've outlined it pretty specifically, how much each thing is going to cost. What I don't want to do is get into a debate of, well, I'd rather spend 60,000 on this and
Right.
30,000 on this.
Right. That's where you say that town meeting appropriates a bottom line.
Right.
And as we said at the
In
last
May.
meet, at the budget advisory group, right, if we get 5%, we'll spend it, we get 6%, we'll spend it, we get 7%, we'll spend it. So I think, Brian, if there is this middle budget that's presented for so I don't even want to call it a budget, just a number. If it's presented for context, it should be made very clear. That's nothing the school committee has reviewed or voted, because we can't say what would
Right.
be in or out, because the superintendent has made no recommendations along those lines.
Right.
And to follow up, and she just said, superintendent just said that would be a cut budget too, because we have growing enrollment at the high school. So
Right.
that's why I asked if it was a level experience budget, because that is, if we want a level, we want that a student has the same experience that they would have had last year.
Right.
Whether or not that's the experience we want them to have is a different question. But this would be a cut budget by that definition. So I think that's important to make sure people understand, so that when they're comparing this budget to a larger budget, to an 8.46, they realize that this is actually just a different cut, and that, I don't know, I'm just confused by it.
Okay,
Thank you for asking.
that's good.
So what I'm looking for from school committee is some sense of direction about whether at our next meeting, you would like me to present some recommended reductions from the 8.46.
Why would we do that preemptively?
I think that certainly there are some reductions that I've already talked about that we
Yeah.
can naturally capture. I guess I'm concerned that the same thing will happen as has happened in past years, and that we will not have a clear sense for what your priorities are on this list should we not have sufficient resources. Where does the world language stand? Where does the enrollment related stand? Where does the technology director stand? And as you get feedback from members of the finance committee or the select board, if there are things on here that will make the decision about the total override number more palatable, at least in year one, it would be helpful for me to get feedback so that we're not scrambling at the last minute to make those changes.
Can I ask, did you discuss this with the FinCom subcommittee?
Yes, I have a strong sense from the finance committee, they'd like to see this 8.46 reduced, that they think that there are some things in here that should be deferred.
Deferred is one
Well-
thing. I thought that was part of the discussion already, that part of this is deferred. So can't we just lay it out percentage-wise on what is deferred? So the technology director, I thought
I guess
you
that'd be
said
good.
was deferred.
It's still in the 8.46.
It's in the 8.46.
It's
I
still
know,
in the
I know, I know.
8.46,
But
yeah.
I'm saying that we've kind of already done this work, and by we, I mean you, that you've already said what we can defer, so can't you create a budget or sheet that says if we're deferring the things that we've outlined, it's actually,
9.9.
no, it's actually 7 point something.
No, it's still actually 8.46,
8.46.
but
The
unless we
8.46.
defer further.
So the
Unless we
8.46
defer
includes the three-quarter time aides in
Oh,
kindergarten as
yeah.
opposed
That's right,
to
that's right,
the
that's
full-time.
right, that's right.
But to carry that forward, one on FinCom might ask, well, would you consider postponing increasing the aides in kindergarten to FY '21? Is that the kind of thing the committee would want to put off? And there are many other things that are on the list. I mean, I think when Judy talks about retirements or resignations, that's really low-hanging fruit. I'm actually still reluctant about taking the enrollment-related elementary teacher, primarily because, although, the numbers seem to paint a pretty clear picture, but as Judy's pointed out, we made a pretty big change in kindergarten in going to the true full day. And it occurred to me the other day when the school committee voted to implement the 3-day option, which was like almost 10 years ago, it actually took about 3 years for the participation to sort of normalize against the census for different reasons. And I think Judy's right on. I think some people, redshirted their kids, they held them back. Maybe some are going to a private school because it was kind of new. And if our history is any indication, that I think this new normal won't be so new anymore, and there may be an uptick coming in those kindergarten classrooms. But we'll know more later because we're not there yet, and we wouldn't certainly fill it if we didn't need it.
So I think that there's I appreciate that, but I think that there's a danger in that Lisa will be reducing too much on the municipal side and will be seen as overreaching on the school side. And if it really should, and I saw an agreement, it was a financing agreement years ago in Lexington, so the agreement is it's a 70-30 split for all revenue coming in, new revenue coming in, schools get 70, town gets 30. I don't want this to be 80% of the override goes to schools and 20 to the town, and suddenly we don't get the public safety or the roads or things that, while there isn't anything on here that I would reduce, I think that it would be helpful to start at least a discussion about prioritization so that when Lisa puts her packet together that we seem reasonable in what we're asking for, even though I can justify every single thing on this sheet. And I think they're all necessary and they're deferred from previous requests. That's the signal I'm getting. I don't know, Lisa, if you have any weigh in on this in terms of perceptions from the outside about this being too rich a ask on the school side.
I don't know if I can speak for the majority of people, but I can say that there's plenty of override requests right now from other communities that are school only. So I don't necessarily think that I think this is like one of those sort of exercises that people want to undertake because they either already have an opinion of where they want to land or,
Right.
or, they just sort of think things should fall within a very neat kind of formula. From all the information I have, I think that all the requests have been reasonable. I mean, I started off talking with Judy about the 9.93. So when we went to the 8.46, and there was talk about massaging things further, I had given Judy my opinion that you guys had already done that process. Certainly if there's absences you don't want to fill or things that you want to delay, that makes sense to me, but everything that you've outlined are things that I feel are extremely important for a quality education system and will benefit our kids greatly, which will in turn benefit the community greatly. So I don't want the task of telling you what you need to cut or prioritize for later, but I would say that publicly I support the 8.46. But I hear where FinCom, they're coming at it from a financial standpoint. I'm thinking about it from a management and a policy and a political standpoint, what we want. And what we want is what we're going to advocate for, as well as trying to be fiscally minded as possible.
So Judy, you made a point in the budget advisory group, which was a week ago, Monday, sort of asking the question, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to get to a number, or are we making a case for our needs, which then drives the number?
Right.
So which is it? And it is, even after last night, to me, a little unclear where we stand with the board. Is it about making a case that gets us to a number, or are there members of the board for whom a number is comfortable and above that is not? I think if there is a number, if it's more the latter, if there is a number, then this exercise you're describing is sort of inescapable if that number doesn't accommodate what we've already voted. If on the other side, it's just about making the case, it's having that meeting at the Jinx on Thursday, it's special town meeting, it's getting the feedback, perhaps we find the support. So for me personally, Judy, I'm not clear yet where this is going because I'm not clear what's driving it with a couple of members of the board. I'm just being very transparent about that.
And that being said, though, I don't think that we're ever going to get to a perfect reconciliation. I think the bottom line is that we would all be comfortable with not asking for override and getting everything we want, right?
Yes, we would.
But the reality is that we have to define our needs. We've done that. I think we have a good case for that. We can sell that moving forward. And at some point in time, it's up to what the people want. Judy and I can run on, half the budget, but you're not going to get what you want, right? So our job is to basically fine tune and manage and articulate what we believe is best for the charge that we've been given, which is having a fantastic town and having a wonderful school district. And that's what we're going to put forward, nothing less,
Yeah.
right? We're not going to say, we're going to sell mediocre and give us some money for it. So we're just going to lay out what it is. And, you know, it's a conversation that we're willing to have. And frankly, no matter what happens in an override, we're going to have the conversation the day after the vote, no matter what happens,
Right.
because this is an ongoing issue, right?
Right.
So I think that because it is, I mean, this is an unusual position that we're in. It's a big ask. Things have been put off for a long time. We have high standards here. There's been incredible work done, I think, on the town and the school side to manage with less over a long period of time. So we just have to articulate that, show that, and also understand that we're going to get criticism that is both justified and completely unjustified, but
Yep.
it's
Right.
part of the job, right? So
Yep.
I think we prepared something that we can move forward with. So, you know, I sort of leave it up to you. If by the end of the day, by the 15th or somewhere before then, if you let me know if you think that 8.46 is massaged to a different number because of, you know, vacancies you don't want to fill, or, you know, got a grant or something like that, then, you know, just give me those new numbers. But I'm not going to push for anything different than what I see.
Okay.
Very helpful.
Very helpful indeed. Thank you for joining us today. Feel free to stick around for the MSBA discussion if you like. Let me, if there's
have your
no.
lunch.
Or I actually have a 1:30 I need to
Yeah.
run to, so.
You were late for that. So,
Thanks, Lisa.
thank you very much for coming today. Appreciate it.
Who has an extra, Lisa, did you get a budget book? I don't think you got one of these.
I didn't get a physical budget book.
I'll grab
Okay,
one for her.
you can take,
This is an extra.
this is an extra.
That's just a stand-in.
Just need her to sign.
These are huge binders.
Yeah, if you need a large doorstop there.
Yeah.
So the kind of binders I find in my house on the first week of school, when teachers say you have to provide a 3 or 4 inch binder, and you're like, is that really going to fill up during the school year?
We
not the
plan
same.
on talking
Oh,
about
because of
fees.
the cohort survival, yeah.
Yeah, we
yeah.
haven't voted fees.
Yep.
Shouldn't we talk about them in line with all of these conversations?
We still need to talk about the fees. We're going out for preschool enrollment, and so I need a registration, so I
I
need to
don't see
start
that on
thinking
our
about that.
future agenda, that's why.
Yeah,
I was
it
thinking if
should
we
be on your
could-
future agenda.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's, we took that out of order. So I'd like to
Page
come
was that,
back
Michelle?
to, I'd like to come back to our discussion on the Morocco and Lynch schools and statements of interest for the MSBA. Brian, you couldn't be with us last time. We had just an introductory conversation about it.
I did watch the
Oh, you-
entirety of the meeting.
Okay, thank you for
After
that.
the fact.
Thank you for that. You're probably the only one in town, but thank you for that. So, so as we know, the windows have opened for the core replacement project, and they close end of March or early April. And
April 12th.
April 12th, thank you. So in that discussion at our last meeting, what we were not looking to vote, but look for some consensus so that Judy and Ellen would update or get started on updating the SOIs for the 2 buildings, which is recommended from the master plan. And Zena had made a suggestion about having some conversation with the community in some way about kind of sharing really kind of what those plans are and why, and getting some feedback for that. Michelle, I thought, also made a good point about sort of questions around schedule now that we've been turned down twice, and that there may be information, just because information's in a master plan, who really knows about it? And I really took that to heart, because, you know, we talked a lot about the master plan with a small group, which is town meeting. We don't talk about it that regularly here at the school committee table. So I had, Michelle, at your sort of question or suggestion, I did go back to the master plan and asked Frida to print this, so you have at the table just one part of the executive summary, but it's the back that I thought would be kind of most interesting to people. I've mentioned before, we had 4 schedules. So for everybody's, just a very quick elevator speech here. So option 1 corresponds to our original submission, which actually came about 3 or 4 months before the master plan was even voted. So our master plan will turn 2 on July 25th. So the master plan's not even 2 years old, although there was certainly a lot of work that was going on at the time. So we submitted, and then as my memory is, Judy, when the master plan was, once it was complete and while they were considering our request, we did send it to them, and of course, they basically just said no. Then option 2, that you see at the bottom of page 15, is the schedule that we just ran, which is we resubmitted. We were pleased to be selected for the senior site study. They came out and they looked at it, and we were one of 28, Lynch was one of 28 projects that they looked at out of, I think, 80 or so submissions. So then, if we turn the page to page 16, option 3 would be the schedule that, you know, we face now with a resubmission, which is we take another crack at it. And of course, it basically pushes everything out by a year. Let me very quickly, though, I'm going to ask you to. Yeah, go ahead.
Two shots at that, though, because I'm looking at that. That says
that
statement of interest. MSBA does not accept new Lynch statement of interest until
what page? I want to be sure I'm following your
page
note.
16.
16.
Option 3.
Option 3. That's actually 2 shots more at trying to get this approved. Am I reading that correctly?
So there was 3 shots. Option 1, option 2, option 3.
But option 3 is
Has fall-
it
has
being
spring
approved
and
in
fall.
Fall of 2020, which is, unless I'm losing track of time, that's not this
That's
year.
not this year.
No,
That's a
so-
shot this year and a shot next
So
year.
the
Am I-
yellow represents the feasibility study,
Yes.
not sort of the submission and waiting period, if you will.
But I'm looking at the actual.
He's
title
looking
of
at the text at
title
the
of
top.
I'm sorry.
MSBA does not accept new Lynch statement of interest until fall of 2020 on option 3.
That's after we submit it this year and they
Yes.
won't, and they don't accept it, is
So
what you're saying.
that's actually, isn't that, we're going to submit, if we choose to submit it, it would potentially be accepted in fall of 2019, unless I'm doing my
Yes,
math
actually, you are correct.
No, it's actually,
No, wait.
it
Hold
gets
on, hold on.
accepted December. It's not fall, but.
Well, but still,
That
19,
is
not
2
20.
shots at that then. It's submitting it this year and or potentially next year. Am I mistaken on that?
So what this is modeling, if you go back and look at option 1 shows a submission in, let's call it early 2018. Spring of 17, because that period is really feasibility study. So that shows spring 17. And then we drop down again, then there's a spring 18 submission. Option 3 is, in fact, is even showing this out a year.
Exactly.
So this
Right,
is
that's what Brian's saying.
So this
Yeah.
is what I wanted to explain, is that if you look at the 2 blue squares, go to option 2. See those 2 blue squares that say Vincent Owen?
Mm-hmm.
It says addition renovation project. So those are timelines that are associated with construction, the expansion of VO on the 3rd floor, because we have that extra capacity. And so there's, in fact, let's just go up to the very top. Go to option 1. You have a long bar for McCall Phase 1, Phase 2, right? There's a bar for Lynch, a bar for Parkhurst Carriage House, and then for Morocco. The Vincent Owen project is basically these 2 small bars, and that was not a priority in option 1 because obviously that would be disturbing to students. 2-year,
Can I interrupt you
sort of
for a minute,
phase
Chris?
occupied building. Yes.
I think Brian's question, though, is what statement of interests are with each option, right? Like, where are we
Question
submitting
about the
it?
timing.
Timing.
Yeah, so
I think I get that.
that's
Okay.
that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So if you look under option 1, we were saying, gee, if we really have to pull the trigger on expanding VO, we would do that much later after we got a new Lynch and a new Morocco. So those sort of 2 timelines hover there. And then we come to option number 2, and again, based on some early predictions about, enrollment growth, that sort of advances in case that was necessary. And so you see a note here that the project timeframe is interchangeable with each other. In other words, it was recommending to a school committee some flexibility, right?
Either one.
To either one, sure. You want to get started on a Lynch, fine. You want to get started on VO, fine, you could do that too. In option 3, the reason why you see sort of the Lynch is pushed off a year and the VO is pulled up is because this was based on those higher 3-year cohort survival ratios, part of what we were talking about last night, Brian. So this was presuming there would be such demand in those first 2 or 3 years of growth that we would have to get that extra space. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But we didn't have time to get Lynch done because Lynch would
Right.
take 4 years. And so this is based on that higher cohort survival ratio that pushes VO up. But of course, the nice thing is, given our discussion about enrollment and what Judy has shared with us,
Not
our
in the-
spike has been with the older kids, not the younger kids.
You're not here.
Exactly. So we don't need to be really talking about expanding VO, the second expansion right now. And so it permits us then to really consider the Lynch or Morocco. And what we've done in the past is we submit both SOIs. That really is sort of good news, right? We can, for at least it appears, we can push off this idea of VO expansion, even though we know it's there. So option 4, I just want to quickly say, why does option 4 look so different? This was the option none of us really wanted to talk about, but it just said we've taken 3 swipes at it and we've not been successful. Again, we presume to see so much enrollment growth, we have to be aggressive and do something. And so here we were actually not only picking up the Vincent Owen project as a necessity, but in fact the Ambrose project, which is described in the master plan as something we might entertain after the decade expires, right? Which is you get rid of the modular classrooms where we have 2 classrooms and you look at a 3-story addition. That was pulled forward. That's certainly something I hope we wouldn't entertain, and it just pushes off the replacement of Lynch and Morocco years down the road. So what we're really looking at here is the option 3 schedule, but no longer with the need to really lean on VO as a priority. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense. I think option 3, at least in my mind, is a 2-shot. It has 2 shots for submitting SOIs because it says if MSBA does not accept news Lynch interest until fall of 2020, and if we submit in the next month and it does not get accepted in fall of 2019, we would still be under option 3 to resubmit in
The next cycle.
next cycle and
That's right.
still be on option 3.
Right.
So that's why. So
Yep.
we talk about 3 shots and we're out. Well, actually, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 shots, at least
Right.
as far as this plan is considered.
Right.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
all I want to make. I
Yeah.
didn't mean to belabor the point. My apologies.
Okay. So, so we had some discussion at the last meeting about this, and I've thought more about this idea of whether it's a community conversation, is it a public hearing, is it a school committee meeting? And it seems to me, because we're a public body, we're either talking about school committee meetings or we're talking about public hearings. A public hearing, is where we would actually be in a position to share what we're doing and why, what the master plan says and why, and be in a position to get feedback. Is that not right? Dina? So, I know,
we're talking about it in terms of being a conversation. and
Yes.
Not sounding so legal as
Right.
a hearing, but I guess that's what
We
we
have it.
function.
and
as
so
a-
I wanted to circle back to that, because I think at the last meeting, Susan, you were saying, but not, hopefully it's not a public hearing, although maybe as a practical matter it would be, but the way in which we might post it and frame it and introduce it, it would be clear what the purpose is.
Procedurally, it would be.
Procedurally, it has to be for
But
posting.
we would not
Yeah.
market it that way.
Yeah. So, so having said all that, the question still remains. So Ellen and Judy have some work to do to update SOIs if they are to be resubmitted for consideration.
Yes.
And there is an opportunity for the school committee to share with the community what the master plan says and why, what action we wish to take and why. Zena, you had asked a question about talking about combination schools, and I think we could do that in that setting. The bigger question is this a committee that wants to reconsider and actually submit for a combination school? Is this a committee that wants to change course from the master plan? And if that's the case, that's a bigger conversation, and I want Judy to weigh in on her thoughts about schedule. I would just remind the committee that this is not a decision that we make on our own in a bubble. It's a joint decision with the select board. SOIs are submitted jointly with the select board. And the select board is on board with the statement of interest for 2 replacement schools and not the combination schools. So that would be, as I said, a big course correction. And I think the timing of that actually would be pretty difficult. But those are my thoughts about it. Do you have thoughts you want to share just about the timing if we were to sort of change course? Judy?
So this is one of those, it's a dilemma, right? It's not a
Yeah.
technical problem.
Right.
And no easy answer.
No clear path.
So our primary objective is to get both Lynch and Morocco replaced as soon as possible at the least cost to get a reasonable result. The MSBA gave us every indication we were pretty close to getting approved for a major project at Lynch. It was just a question of, they had a lot of middle and high school projects that were, the price of projects has escalated very significantly, and so it ate up all of their available funds. If one fewer high school or middle school project had been approved, we may be sitting here, talking about raising money for a feasibility study and going forward with Lynch. So I think
an override.
and another override
Might have
for
been a
debt
blessing not
exclusion,
to have
right?
At the same time, even
Yes.
though
Right.
I
Right.
don't want to say that, but
So the
But you just,
so yeah. So as I've said in the past, getting both Lynch and Morocco replaced as soon as possible is a priority, because I don't want students educated in schools that don't fit 21st century teaching and learning, that have issues with heating and cooling, and that have gone past their useful life. And so, but there are a number of challenging factors. There is the need for swing space. There are the limitations of each site due to flood plains and other considerations and traffic and a dead-end entrance on Bates Road and so forth. So there's also strong community sentiment that we heard when we were doing the master plan. We had considered a combination school or a shared site school with two schools that are essentially separate schools with some shared facilities. We didn't really have a site that was large enough for that and ready to go with that without a lot of sort of further research. That would double the cost of building, although over the 10-year construction period where we're going to get both replaced, obviously it's cheaper to upfront it and avoid that cost escalation. So I'm somewhat torn on this, because there's no easy place, even if we wanted to move forward with a combination school, that I could say readily right now would be a good place for that. And I think that we could end up in a place where both Lynch and Morocco are unhappy because nobody can walk to school except a small number of kids. And so it's a question of kind of, if we want to go back to the drawing board to talk about what is our commitment to neighborhood schools, what would a shared school look like, how much would it cost, and where would that put us in the MSBA process, because that's more like a middle school cost or a small high school cost as opposed to an elementary replacement cost. And it could push us out, unless we have a failing roof or major facility issues at our schools.
We're close. on Lynch.
Well, Lynch has a lot of leaks, but there are schools that have been on the list that are far worse than Lynch. The combination of sort of enrollment pressures and aging facilities have kind of pushed us up on the list a bit. Enrollment pressures could be, my biggest concern is I'm going to have 100 more kids than I anticipated and no place to put them on any given year based on building projects. But right now, we don't have any building projects that are shovel ready that are going to bring those extra students in. So I think there are philosophical questions, and then there are questions of the original plan, which called for, if the site will, and the feasibility study will tell us this, replacement of Lynch, retaining of the old Lynch, using it as swing space for Morocco so that we can avoid that cost of renting 20 or 30 modular classrooms, which
It's
added,
100% on us.
and it added a lot of cost to the high school project to do that. And it's a little bit of an adventure for the students who are involved when you have a completely modular kind of experience.
outdoor classrooms.
But it's not the same educational experience as being in a school building. So the reason we went with Lynch first is it's a larger school. It's where most of our preschool classrooms are, and it provides for swing space for Morocco students. If we replaced Morocco first and we didn't build on the same site as Lynch, it has fewer options for swing space. And so the plan kind of makes sense to me. And I'm also weighing, is this a discussion we want to have right now when we're asking for $4 million increase in our budget, and people will get confused about, my taxes are going to go up again with a debt exclusion, and how quickly is that going to happen, and am I going to support an override? I don't want to jeopardize the operation for something that may or may not happen, and will likely not involve the current students who are at either school. By the time any of the kids are in the new school, a lot of the students will have already moved on. And so we're really looking what's the good of the whole population, and how can we do this in a cost-effective way that's going to convince the MSBA to help us out.
Because, if I can just interject a question, even if Lynch were to be accepted in the next round, we're talking about a year out for groundbreaking, 2 years.
Or more than that.
So we would have 9 months to secure funding for feasibility study. We typically do it faster than that. We do it at the next town meeting, and then feasibility could take a year. And then you're into schematic design. And
2021.
Okay, so now you're at 2021, possibly 2022 starting, and then building Lynch for a year or two?
year and a
least.
half.
A year and
18
a half,
months
2
to
years?
2.
Okay. Now you're at 2024. Now you're expecting Lynch, the old Lynch, to have withstood the test of time enough to put the Morocco kids who have a nicer building into Lynch, which has unbelievable drafts of air. There's BB gun holes in windows. I mean, wow.
So I don't think there's anything in the master plan that says what you just did. We've not said we would put Morocco students in the old Lynch. What we've said is we would build one new school across from the other and have that square footage available for swing space. So the committee never
Swing
got
space,
to that
yeah.
sort of
Right.
granular, I mean.
But now
an
I'm
existing
asking
building.
it, right?
So you're suggesting
So-
you would have Lynch stay in the old
I'm
Lynch?
saying, all I'm being clear is, we have not actually determined what you were just saying. So do two school communities share both buildings? Does K2 go into one and 3-5 go into the other? We don't know. I just want to be clear that we never made that kind of statement.
So if we can't make those kinds of statements, how can we be so sure we want to go through with Lynch and then Morocco rather than Lynch and Morocco? Like, without that information, a Lynch parent being told, yeah, we're going to build the new Lynch, but Morocco's going to go in first. And that, I mean, these are like real questions that have to be considered for the community to support a project, either A or B. Do you know what I mean? Like, if I can't tell them that, what's the motivation for any community member at this point to go forward with Lynch?
Chris, are these questions that come up in feasibility?
Specifically, what, like
Location does.
where kids go for swing space, you mean?
Location, swing space,
yeah.
is that something we could
Yes.
reconsider could we reconsider a combined school at the feasibility stage? Is this our last chance?
So I'm glad you asked this. So and I feel I bear some responsibility for even the talk about combination schools, because one of the things we really wanted to get ahead of is we knew what was happening in districts like Wellesley, which have, Judy, I think you said it's seven elementary schools, but they're smaller elementary schools. So with some districts, Wellesley did something similar to what we did. They submitted SOIs on 2 schools. They kind of faced a similar situation, actually. And with that district, the MSBA's preference was, wow, you made a really compelling case. Like, for both of these schools, we're interested in working with you on a combination school. And that became extremely divisive in that community. It was tearing parts of that community apart.
So
But not every community is like Wellesley, right?
Okay.
And
I don't know
so
Wellesley
the
enough to-
feedback we've received is, you know your district better than we do, and, they are familiar with our rate of enrollment increase, our, I'll use the word capacity with a lowercase c, but we all kind of know what that means, right? We're out of space. So we submitted 2 different statements of interest. I think we made clear, at least offline, Ellen, that we weren't just working hard on the Lynch SOI and kind of mailing in the Morocco SOI. We really worked hard on both, with the expectation that if funds are so limited and there's something that's just more compelling about Morocco, I mean, prior school committees have said, because it's a school committee decision, Zena, in terms of which one is
We
prioritized.
prioritize.
Which, by the way, is not even a discussion we're having right now. It's more about giving administration the direction to go ahead and update the SOIs, which this time around won't be as much work as it was in prior years. And then when they're ready to go, then the school committee has to decide which is the priority. But the MSBA might say, gee, we really actually want to talk a lot about Morocco this time. Prior school committees have said, well, if we vote Lynch first and Morocco second, and the MSBA says we want to partner with you on Morocco, we're not going to walk away from that deal, which is important because if that were to happen, that's where we would talk about like the pre-K program being at Morocco, because right now a lot of it's at Lynch and VO, so that would then pick up space at VO and Lynch and relieve some overcrowding there as well. So it's just about saying, if we update both SOIs, then sometime this spring, when Judy and Ellen say they're ready, then we would have to decide, do we know anything different than we've known before? What's our priority? Is it Lynch or Morocco?
Judy, can we do 3 SOIs?
We
Like a
don't,
combined
no.
one, a Morocco, a Lynch one?
no, we can only do the existing school, identify its issues. We put 2 SOIs forward, we have to prioritize one. And we had prioritized Lynch for the reasons that I stated, but getting back to your question about swing space for Morocco's reconstruction, if Morocco is relocated, then we don't need swing space, right? We could relocate Morocco in a different location, and
Oh, like Leonard
the students
Field or
just move over,
something?
right, right.
So-
So there's no sort of domino that is essential to.
Feasibility works a lot of that
feasibility
out.
Tell us all.
And can I just go back to, I want to be sure I answer your question though about the site selection piece. So for the high school, which was of course townwide, we spent a lot of time looking at sites all over the town.
Right.
For VO, there really was no alternative site other than looking at using some of the science park, and that was tied up with Conservation Commission. So because VO was a neighborhood school with no other open space really
Nearby.
anywhere to consider, alternative sites didn't come up. However, for a Lynch rebuild, you can be sure we'd be looking at the Lynch Fields. That's already in the master plan. Some have suggested for Morocco, we look at Leonard Field. Could you maybe build a Morocco at Leonard Field and you swap? I mean, before Morocco was built, they were just open fields. That's where Francis Morocco played soccer with his friends because there wasn't a school there. So we'd lose some field space for 3 or 4 years. But we could do some. So we would study school site and site selection, but again, sort of within the confines of like a neighborhood district, if you will.
I was elected to be the voice of the public, not to make these decisions in isolation. So I still prefer that we find a way to effectively, not necessarily to mess up the process or make it more convoluted, but to effectively get feedback. We toured Morocco, and Principal West was amazing. Her school is amazing because of the people. And so I asked her what she thought, and she was going to reach out to you and coordinate and see what you would like to do in terms of surveying the parents, surveying the community. I don't know what the best answer is. All I know is to ask. So at this point, I'm just putting it kind of back on you, Judy and Ellen, and what's your expert opinion in terms of the next step for me? I don't really know where to go from
So
here.
if it's the will of the committee to pull back and take a look at other options, rather than a submittal of Lynch in Morocco, with Lynch being the priority, then I think the only thing is not to submit the statements of interest this year and do a further exploration. Or submit the statements of interest as we have previously submitted them, and then if we decide to explore, we can always tell MSBA we're pulling from consideration to regroup. If we miss the window,
We missed the window.
We
I
missed
thought
the window till
window's
next
until
year.
April.
right, but it's going to take us we should already have been working on this because the submissions are,
Right. The
Impending.
Right.
We vote to submit in March, and then, because there's a little more work to do, because
Right.
you submit it electronically.
Correct. And the process of just even updating the SOIs, it's time consuming. It is time consuming because there's a lot of details. It's
Like
still
developing a budget.
Just like the budget, there's 2 SOIs.
right. There's 2 SOIs.
so I just think there's not enough time between now and April to change course and ask for feedback. But even if we were invited to participate in next December, before we agree to participate, then we can revisit it. And we will have more information. We'll have another year of budget information. We'll have another year of enrollment information. We'll have another year of capital deferred projects. And there could be a greater sense of urgency because the building systems could begin to fail. And we may be sitting here doing an accelerated repair project request as opposed to renovation rebuild.
Because I've been in classrooms where they're 50, 60 degrees at Lynch.
So there are a few classrooms in all of our buildings, not just Lynch,
Yep.
VO, Ambrose, Lincoln,
Yep.
all 5 elementary schools are challenged on really cold days. And there are some classrooms that are colder than we'd like. And except for VO, which had kind of a heating coil issue or something in the music room, or a thermostat issue, all of the other 5 elementary schools all the other 4 elementary schools and Parkhurst are very challenged on cold days. We
And
don't
hot
have
days.
we don't have new windows.
hot
We don't
days.
have you know
Which is
and hot
worse,
days.
right? I'd rather
right.
it
So
cold.
we are so.
Pardon me.
That's par for the course. I don't like to walk down the hallways and see leaks. I don't like to have failing heating systems. Brian and Chris, having worked on capital, are intimately familiar with all of the deferred things that need to be done in these buildings.
Right.
The floor in the next room has completely failed. All of the tiles have popped up.
It has happened here, but they've put it back together like a puzzle.
They've tried to, as you look around.
That's why you call it a temporary classroom, Judy.
And how long have these
Biodegrading.
Permanently
This was,
Permanently.
Biodegradable, did you
Morocco
say?
has a few of those too, I think, and
Yes.
Ambrose.
Yeah. So,
90, I'll have to think about that.
so there's
Stumped me.
So to be
Yeah, go ahead. Help me out here. So I hope I've been
So to
as
be
clear
clear,
as I
even
can.
if we vote today for you to move forward with the SOIs as stated, that doesn't mean the conversation with the community couldn't happen between April and December.
Correct.
I think it should have. I think
Right.
I think there was a very good suggestion about one of the two of you had said it. I mean, just because it's in the master plan doesn't mean people understand it, and
Right.
you're absolutely right. And we should talk about it. And it's something that I have shared. So I'm in my 13th year as a Morocco parent, consecutively. And when we talk about the rebuild and MSBA, in fact, we were talking about it in the last master plan when we were pushing for a new VO. We have talked about sort of the age of our school buildings. VO was under construction in 1954, 55. It was the oldest building. I mean, you talk about leaks. I mean, there were days where there would be thunderstorms and there were literally streams going down the steps. It was awful. So, there was some understanding that building really has to go, right? Be replaced. It's interesting. Lynch is 7.5, I think, years older than Morocco. So if we're so fortunate that MSBA would partner with us with one after the other, like they did with VO in the high school, we might find that the buildings are being replaced sort of at a similar age. But I have really been consistent with the Morocco community in saying that although some in this community may be concerned or anxious about a combination school, that if after submitting 2 statements of interest, right? So what if the MSBA suddenly treats us like a Wellesley and says, okay, given what we know now about Lynch, look at those millions of dollars you have, but also the millions you have in Morocco. Based on what we know now, we'd like to talk to you about a combination school. Of course, we would want to talk to them about it, right? It's not that we're saying no, we're against it. It's more about saying this is what our plan
What's
is.
the opportunity?
This is we wouldn't walk away from
Right.
that. And I've certainly, for my part, tried hard to be sure the Morocco community understands that might come up because it's come up in other communities.
Thank you for indulging me.
Thoughts from this side?
Quick question, because I missed the last meeting, even though I did see it. We're talking about, there's been discussion about going from 2 neighborhood schools to 1 larger school. And what I don't have is the context of even though I watched it, of where that sort of inspiration came from. It's not clear to me that anything's changed since we sat down and looked at this all. It's not we, meaning we, the big we, because I wasn't here, but we knew an override was coming, so we knew there would be those expenses. We knew enrollment, where it was going. We knew the aging of these schools. I'm unclear what is new that's making somebody say, well, let's do a combination school, because even our schedules, these aren't new. These are things that we knew 2 years ago, and maybe people hoped we'd be option 1, but if option 3 was, well, if it takes that long, we should do a combination school, I think that'd be in here. So I'm just curious what's changed.
So the sense of urgency is, I think, caused by the 2 aging facilities and new school committee members who are open to considering an option that would get both schools replaced sooner at a lower cost over the long run, if that were to be the best way to have both schools replaced, and if it were palatable to the wider community. So I think that the reason it comes up is that when we are discussing, are we going to submit the same plan, the same statements of interests, another voice is saying, well, perhaps we need to look at other options and not just go with the same plan. And I think that's a valid, that's what you're all elected to do, is to sort of ask those hard questions. And again, it's a dilemma. There's no right answer to this. Every year that we push it out, the more concerned I get about the two facilities, how aged they are, and the inequity between, a VO and those schools. And that's just, we have to accept that the educational program is the same, that the teachers are all great, but that the physical plant has limitations, particularly the cafegimatorium.
Finally saw that.
Oh, it's fun to say.
And Lynch, and it is fun to
Very
say.
fun to spell.
And Lynch being our one of our more diverse schools with lots of kids with a variety of needs, and in a facility that doesn't always fit that. So I think it's a valid question. I don't think right now is the time to start opening that discussion for reasons we've already stated. But we haven't missed the window to have that discussion. It just means it may be that if we have that discussion into next fall and we get invited to participate, that we'll have to make some hard choices about whether we participate or whether we do go in a different direction to do more study. So that's really, I think it is a important question to ask. Are we sure this is the plan we want to submit at this time? And I really don't think, to be truthful, I don't think that Ellen and I have the capacity to start opening a discussion about other options for Lynch and Morocco at this time, given the issues we have with the budget. But you don't have to vote today. This is still a discussion, and we can.
That's right. So we're not looking for a vote, but what we are just to be clear, so we're not wasting the administration's time, is we're just looking for some majority consensus to start updating the SOIs. And then what will happen is, Ellen or Judy will work with me and Michelle just to be sure that it's coming back on an agenda with time for us to understand. When they're ready, I think we'll talk about what's changed. My sense is really the only things that will change are the descriptions of enrollment, and then of course we may have a better sense of the deferred maintenance burden. It's really just about adjusting that. As I said earlier, this is the year where the nature of the update is actually pretty modest. A year ago, we had more work to do because, first of all, the master plan was actually complete. We had also, RDK had completed their heating and piping distribution study that looked at the boiler and all manner of heating and water at Lynch, and we were able to incorporate that as well. So this lift is not as big. So we have some consensus to do that. I'm looking for nods.
I think so, yes.
Nods?
Can we nod?
Okay.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
And then let's continue to figure out how we be sure the community's plugged into this, and when and how we can share it.
Right.
And invite some feedback from people.
Yep.
That is really important, and that's just, I think, not going to happen at a regular school committee meeting because we don't kind of get back and forth in public comment. So
Right.
one way or another, a public hearing of some kind, as casual as we can make it, might be warranted. Okay, thank you all for that.
Page 32.
So, you said page 32, Judy?
Approval of
Approving
minutes.
So Frida made a change. It was just a procedural change for the continuation of the meeting on the 7th. And Susan had actually picked up, I think, a couple of typos on the 22nd. And then subsequently, Susan was looking to make a change on something she said under the discussion about MSBA.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to share that. The typo stuff we don't have to get into, that's all it was.
Yeah, it was just changing polling to voting,
Yeah.
because in the context of the paragraph, is whether it's a survey or people are coming in the door
Yep.
to vote. And then the other one, which was about the MSBA.
Page 40.
Page 40, just to change, and I get it that you're trying to summarize something, but, it says revisit the master plan. I really didn't mention the master plan. I said, we want to look at ways to reach out to the community to present information on projects for Lynch and Morocco. So that was it.
Okay.
So I didn't see any other edits from anybody else. If there's a motion to approve both minutes at once as presented and amended,
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. So under chair report, so again, I just want to thank everybody for being a presence at all of these meetings. The meeting last night at the high school, very well attended. I thought Lisa did a great job kind of summarizing the overall municipal impact. The questions, so I know Brian and Susan were there. Michelle was actually covering for us at Town Hall, I think, at that time. So what I picked up from that meeting is, and I shared this with the select board last night, Judy, there is a real hunger among those who are coming to these meetings to what is the story and what can we start saying, where can we go for information? I think they appreciate that there are places they can go and ask questions, and to the extent they like the answers, they're wishing there's a place they could go to find the information. So there is, as Susan and I have said before, there is a website we've created that shares information. We've also been asked by the select board to kind of hold off on making that public, so, you know, it continues to be an awkward position to be in. I might revisit this with the chair of the select board and ask if maybe we can publish it in a limited way and just keep it to FAQs or something, but we'll see where that goes. But I just thought that the folks who were there were absolutely engaged and asking great questions.
It's all publicly available information that you've summarized for the website, right? There isn't anything factually
Right, they
inaccurate
could-
or.
Yeah, I mean, the rub is, so.
Hopefully
what's
not.
Well, here's the issue is, so what's the number?
Sam has read the FAQs.
Yep.
You've read the FAQs.
Read the FAQs.
Yeah,
I know they're
my
long,
recommendation would be to either try to
but- I know.
put it on our website, or, I mean, I'm getting a lot of questions
Okay.
and concerns about lack of access to information.
Right.
Do you know if the presentation that was made at the town hearing by the chair of the select board is available anywhere? I can't find it on the town
It's not on
website.
the town website.
I think it's on WinCam.
Right,
But
but
People
it's
aren't
not.
going to watch
the
WinCam, they want to
slides.
see,
The
they want to see the
Slides.
presentation.
We have our
Slides.
slides on the,
Sure.
the website.
It's a good, I'll follow
could-
up.
yeah, you could
and
ask.
At the very least, if I could put that on
Okay.
a link to it on our website, that would be
Right.
helpful to people.
Okay.
Because I haven't shared the municipal picture, because
You don't.
And it
Have
impacts
municipal.
impacts the schools a lot.
Right,
Yeah.
It's not just
Crossing
a different
guards.
silo that, yeah,
Right.
crossing guards.
right.
So, and I just want to thank everybody for being there last night at the select board meeting. We got a couple of questions at the table I guess I wasn't quite expecting, but glad that others were there at the table to try to do our best to answer them. And I think, Judy, I know you've sent some information to a couple of members of the select board, but given some of the questions that came at the table, we might need to circle back and maybe resend some information just so we're clear on what the scope is.
I'm happy to
You know, in
meet
the
with
ask.
or
I
send
know
any
you've done it. I
information,
know
yeah.
you've done it.
So just let me know what they are and who I
Okay.
should speak with, and I'd be happy to do it.
Okay. Judy, what report do you have?
I sent you an update on Friday, and so I think that summarizes what you need to know for this week. In
And
case
so-
you have any questions, just come and see me.
And so just want to confirm, dates are, we're imminently getting bids on McCall Phase 2, subs and general contractor filed sub bids and general bids. I know one date got pushed.
Isn't it the 6th,
Nothing's
I
in
thought?
yet, right?
Is the 7th still on, Judy?
So the EFPBC rescheduled their meeting for
It's gonna be next week.
next week, so I think that I think we'll be able to share information at the EFPBC meeting on the 13th, yes.
So I think it's the 7th and the 23rd is what I
Okay.
had in my head, right? For the two bid dates? Sub bids and then the general bids? Ish?
7th is in my mind. but
Okay.
I think,
Okay. Fingers crossed. Okay, thank you. Future agenda items, as Zena and Michelle mentioned, we may see something recommended by the policy subcommittee, but you still, did you say you haven't yet met with the students, but you're
This week.
We're
This
meeting
week.
with the students this week.
this week?
So
Okay,
next.
thank you.
Next agenda can have the policy.
March 5th.
FY19 budget update, the school choice, we are required, is that by the end of May or by May? What's the deadline for that, Judy? I think it's May something.
Yeah, I would propose to have it in March.
Oh, to get it out of the way.
Yeah.
That's good. I
Don't
like
wanna
that.
miss it.
Don't want to miss it. Can this school committee actually make that decision
Yes,
before the municipal election?
sure.
Why not?
Oh, cool. Okay. And you'll be looking get some information from me soon around the superintendent evaluation, so here today, but be looking for that, so we'll have that as a future agenda item. And someone said tonight, I'm sorry,
Another
tonight,
agenda
today.
item.
Yes, another
Fees.
agenda item?
Fees.
Thank you.
Yep.
That was Zena.
When do we
brought
have
that
to
up, right?
settle on, I mean, obviously, would presumably be after the override, but we
Yeah,
need,
I was gonna just ask if we needed another placeholder meeting at the end of February, perhaps after is March 5th too long to wait after the
Town meeting?
after town meeting and the select board votes on an official number for an override, providing they vote on one?
Town meeting's not voting on it.
No, but after select board votes. So we heard last night that might be as soon as the 11th, as late as the 14th.
It seems like it's a lot of time, except I'm thinking of what Sam said last night.
Right.
The finance committee's got a lot of work to do.
Right.
And certainly would be reaching out to Judy and the budget advisory group with questions.
If we need to have
If
another
we have
budget
to
advisory.
reprioritize.
I think if we have to, we could do it. I'm
Week
hesitant
after
to say
vacation?
add it
That's
now.
what I was just thinking, is
Yeah.
I wondered if we just wanted to put a placeholder meeting in on the 26th of February, on our normal Tuesday.
Let me see, what have we got going?
it's worth putting something down.
That's what I'm thinking, so that we
it's
hold the
scheduled,
date.
so we could do it.
That's the
Right.
master plan phase 2 public forum.
Yeah, there is a forum on the master.
FYI.
Well, we could,
We could do a
Could do it
daytime meeting.
we could do a
meeting.
daytime meeting if it's,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I just
thank you.
wanted to go
I'm
to
okay
that.
with
Yeah.
that.
Since that's
The
the-
date, let's just say no specific time. We just say for now, daytime question mark
On Tuesday, the
on
26th.
Tuesday. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd just rather hold it than everybody's schedules get
Okay.
full.
Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I can do that. Tuesday, the 26th, daytime.
We do have a need, again, for an executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining for units B, C, and D, since discussion in an open meeting may have detrimental effect on bargaining or litigating position of this committee. To go into executive session, I need a roll call vote. Can I start with Susan?
Aye.
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 And we will reconvene in public session only for the purposes of adjourning the meeting. Next meeting dates, again, March 5th, 19th, and as we said, we got a placeholder if we need it.
Thank you.
Thank you.